It's let's see what we have here. What's up, ladies and gentlemen, Acklon here, and of course, welcome back to each and every one of you. I hope that you guys have had a wonderful day, and yeah, that you're gonna enjoy the stream. Hopefully, it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be good. We've got a lot of things to go through. Two massive reacts that we have to get through. One is from Ian Azikostas and Preach. We finally have the actual full-length interviews. Obviously, Preach showed us sort of the a collection of a bunch of interviews. We're now going to get the full interview. Hopefully, more of those full interviews will come out over the course of probably the next few weeks or so. Probably going to do like one a week. That's what I would do. Just one a week, stretch out the content as much as possible. Token, how you doing, fam? And then the other one that we have to react to is the Diablo developer live letter kind of thing. Not entirely sure what to call it, but yeah, there's been like a massive... Diablo's really heating up at the minute. So if we look at... Let me just go to watch later, because I think I have both of these videos sort of tagged in my watch later list. Yeah, it's called Inside the Game... No, it's not called Inside the Game. Oh my god, what is it called again? Fuck. It's a brand new Diablo video. It's also over an hour long. We're gonna have, like, today's two reacts is gonna take up most of our time. Here we go. It's called the Diablo 4 Developer Update live stream for February 2023, which obviously... I think next week we get the open beta for Diablo 4. I think it's next week. Or the week after next week, actually. I think it's the open beta for Diablo 4. Which could be really good. Token, how you doing, fam? What have you been up to? Isn't it like super late for you? You're in Australia, no? Oh, fuck. Dude, I am so sore. Open beta was 24th, 26th, so almost a month left. Yeah, something like that. Something like that, Ariana. I'm not entirely, like, sure on the dates. I know it's coming soon. They're really picking up steam now. Releasing so much shit about Diablo 4. Token, 224 or 245. What the fuck am I saying? So yeah, very early or late for you, depending on, right? Mr. Demuria, how you doing, fam? Mew, how you doing? Was early access weekend the week before or something? Yes. So there's like, if you pre-order the game, you get 2 open beta weekends. You get like 1 earlier, and then the next week we have the open beta, which is actually more like just a stress test or something. So, yeah. I mean, it's cool. If they're already doing open beta, do we know when the game is going to launch? Have they given us an exact date on the launch of Diablo 4 yet? Geek Out Corner, how you doing, bro? 4 months, part of the DJ Nation. Appreciate you. I see you there. Thank you. 6-6, I believe. Oh, shit. It's not that long still. It's like 3 more months. 3 months and 5 days. Are we there? That's good. That's good. Go God, how you doing? On a new business, helping people with intellectual disabilities. Oh shit, Token. Nice, bro. Fucking congrats. Kudos on that. Like, holy shit. Is it your business, or are you just helping, like, figure out how to get the business up and running? I will never trust a Blizzard game again. Always wait for it to come out to make sure it's not shit again. Miro, to be fair though, I do that with everyone, right? The only time I buy games on pre-order is if it's games that I'm gonna be playing them on stream, because then I'm gonna be playing it anyways on stream, so may as well buy it. Otherwise, I don't pre-order games that I'm not gonna play on stream and that I'm gonna be playing myself. I usually also do the same thing. I'll wait until I see like a review of the game. Like, for example, we watched the Company of Heroes right? Number 3, yesterday. We watched the review on that. Because I know I'm not going to be playing that live on stream. And so I'll wait until I see a number of reviews on it. And then if I trust it, then great. You know, if I think, okay, it looks cool enough, I'll give it a go. Final Fantasy is the only pre-orders I've done. I didn't pre-order Hogwarts Legacy. I waited for that literally day before. So technically I did pre-order, but I also didn't pre-order. Elden Ring, I didn't pre-order at all. I bought it maybe like a couple of days after it launched. And then Final Fantasy 16, I can't pre-order because I don't own a PS5 and I'm not buying one. So there's that, right? My own pathways to employment and hospitality and adventure camps, snowboarding, hiking, etc. Token, good job, bro. And good luck. Starting a new business is fucking... It's stressful. It's stressful because you never know what's going to happen, right? You never know what's going to go wrong, what could go right. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I want to do the whole starting a new business again. That was some of the most stressful times of my life because you work very long hours for very little money because most of your money goes back into the business and you have no idea if tomorrow you wake up and there's nothing left, right? Just ordered myself some biltong. We'll be here in about 2 to 4 days. Minuar, I want to hear what you have to say about it, right? Once you get it, let me know. To be fair, I don't expect biltong to be as good in Europe and places like that. I don't expect you guys to have good biltong. Because I think... I might be mistaken, but I think that most of the biltong that you guys would get would be either made in South Africa and then shipped to Europe, or if it's made in Europe, it's probably not going to be made the same as in South Africa. We don't have the same stringent rules around like how food may or may not be prepared. So, for example, a lot of the biltong that I've seen in like England, for example, comes in tin packaging. Now, I've only ever had biltong in a tin packet, package, tin foil package, twice, and I've hated both of them. The tin foil captures a lot of the moisture inside, so what it does is it sort of makes the biltong, it just ruins the texture a little. Whereas here, biltong just hangs. You walk into a butchery, you'll find like a bunch of biltong just hanging, and you just pick a piece that you like, and they cut it up for you, and there you go, right? It's much better when it's fresh. Always better when it's fresh. Doesn't sound too bad so far. He uses from local farmers with the traditional method. Then hopefully that's good. I didn't know this, but cows also around the world differ quite a bit. So, for example, I went to a butcher about a month ago, right? And I basically spoke to him for quite a while, probably almost an hour, about the different beef cuts that he has, and does he dry age his meat? How long does he dry age it for? What kind of cuts does it come from? And I basically complained to him. I was like, dude, why do we not have the same intermuscular fat on our meat? You know, when you get a steak, for example, in South Africa, there will be like fat on the outside. So on the outer rim, there'll be fat, but very little fat in the meat itself. And he was like, well, are you talking about like the cuts that you see in YouTube videos from America? And I was like, yeah, why don't we have beef like that? He's like, oh, because we don't have those cows. Our cows don't have that intermuscular fat. Our cows hold a lot more of its fat on the outside, very little of its fat inside the meat. But the difference between it is our cows have a lot more beefy taste. So it's a lot more of a beefy taste versus the cows in America, which doesn't have the same kind of taste. I didn't even fucking know that's a thing. Like, genuinely. I know there's different types of cows, but I genuinely thought a cow's a fucking cow, right? If it eats grass, it's gonna taste like beef. But no, apparently not. Apparently every country has a completely different set of like fucking taste profiles when it comes to their beef. Zucchini, holy shit, 2 years. Part of the DJ Nation. Appreciate you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Zucchini, how's the house coming? You guys still building, or have you now finally moved in and everything's done and dusted? Abaddon, how you doing, fam? The Dark Lord, how you doing? Go-Kart Mozart, how you doing? Diet is just as big an effect as well. I found that out because UK ones are grass-fed and also meant to be meatier taste than US cows, which are corn-fed. I don't really give a shit about either of those things. Like, I'd say the majority of cows in South Africa, at least, is corn-fed. The majority of them. That being said, though, there are a lot of farmers now that is sort of moving away from the corn-fed thing and moving towards grass-fed because it's cheaper. So my dad, for example, when he first started like farming with cattle, he did the whole, like, you know, just have them all inside a camp with feeding troughs and just let them eat, right? And let them get fat. The problem is you make very little profit on every single cow there because the amount that they eat and the stuff that is in that food is quite expensive. So effectively, you need to have a massive turnover. And the only guys that can really do that are guys that's farming with 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 cows at a time. Like, for example, there's a cow farmer just outside my old hometown that he's got like 150,000 cows. They kill, I think, like 15,000 cows a day, right? So that's the turnover. So they can make a shit ton of money doing that. But your normal farmer, it's not worth. It's much better just let them walk in the field, eat the grass, and, you know, they get fatter, number one. And they actually gain a lot more weight just walking in the field than what they gain if they're on like a corn-fed thing. So I didn't know that. I genuinely didn't. But apparently that is a thing. Here's a funny thing, Abaddon. So there's a person that I follow, Michaela Peterson. I don't know if you guys know who she is. She's the daughter of Jordan Peterson. But she has like... she was diagnosed at the age of 6 with childhood arthritis, had one of her hips replaced, and, you know, like massive bad shit, right? And she's carnivore. But here's the funny thing. Here's what I wanted to tell you guys. She can't eat grass-fed beef, which blew my fucking mind. Grass-fed beef sets off her arthritis. Corn-fed beef, on the other hand, does not. She can also not do dry-aged beef. So when she goes to the butchery, she has to ask for fresh beef that wasn't dry-aged at all, and that isn't grass-fed, grass-finished. It has to be corn-fed. It's just like, how the fuck? how does that make sense? That is just wild, dude. The amount of shit that goes on in our bodies that doesn't make sense. It's wild. So, as I was saying at the beginning of the stream, you guys do know we have, like, an absolute shit ton of reacts to do today, right? It's only 2 videos that we have to react to. But we're probably going to be here for about 4 or 5 hours reacting to these 2 videos, because both of these videos is over an hour long. But actually, normally, prepared Wagyu, I have Metal Fan from Al. I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not the biggest fan of Wagyu. It's lovely, don't get me wrong. It's absolutely amazing. There's nothing wrong with it taste-wise, but it's not really for eating. If you were in the mood for a steak, right? You wanted to have a steak, and you wanted to have just a steak, you can't have Wagyu. Especially not A5 Wagyu, which I've had a small piece of, because that shit is wildly expensive. But here's the problem with it. It is so rich, and there's so much fat in it, that just a tiny piece of it is more than enough to sort of satiate you. It's just too rich. Which means that can't be your only meal. If you were having the Wagyu with, like, say, a bowl of noodles or some shit, sure, the noodles is the thing that's meant to fill you up. The Wagyu is just there as, like, a treat. But if you just want steak, a normal piece of fucking steak would be great. And funny enough, Albuar, we don't have $2 steak in South Africa, sadly. But I am a fan of cheap steak. Like we have a thing called tenderized steak here, right? Which is like the cheapest cut of steak you can get. It's tenderized to fuck. I kind of like that. Just throw that in a pan with some butter. It's nice. It gives me the beefy taste that I crave, and, it's good. Another thing that I do with it quite often, yes, I love lamb. I'm going to have lamb tonight. I have a ribeye downstairs and 4 lamb chops, so I'm going to have lamb and ribeye. But something that I do quite often nowadays, which I really fucking love, is I'll make, like, very cheap steak, like tenderized steak, right? Like beaten with one of those meat tenderizing hammers until it's, like, proper tender, right? But I'll cook that in butter, right? And then I'll slice it up in thin little slices, and I'll throw it into the air fryer. So I leave it in the air fryer until all of the edges have sort of crisped up. So all of the edges have sort of gotten crispy. And then I'll eat that. And it is fucking amazing. Of course, it is more overdone than normal. I wouldn't eat a ribeye like that, for example, because ribeye can't be well done. It has to be medium rare. But those cheap cuts of steak can't be medium rare. You will never be able to eat it medium rare. Beat your meat is good. Oh yeah, of course. You have to. Mercer, traditional South African food with lamb? Barbecue. The most traditional South African food you can get is barbecue. There's nothing more traditional, but it's also weird. Like, when you guys ask me about traditional South African foods, the problem there is that traditional South African food is just traditional European food from different countries. So if I gave you, like, for example, bobotie, right? Bobotie is a kind of thing that they make here, but it's French. It's a French dish. We just gave it a different name, and it's now a very popular thing here, but it's French. Or, some of our cakes will be Dutch or German, things like this. So we take very heavy inspiration from the Dutch, the French, and the German, and some British stuff. But we don't have, I wouldn't say South Africa has, like, particularly anything that is completely purely South African. I don't think South Africa is old enough for that. Like, if you look at South Africa is fairly young-ish, and in terms of actually having its own identity, South Africa is incredibly young. I would say black South Africans have a lot more traditional dishes than white South Africans have. But their traditional dishes I won't eat, because they eat things that I genuinely can't eat, because I find it disgusting. So, for example, if you go into, like, predominantly black restaurants and stuff, they'll serve things like heart and some kind of mooty thing. It's a weird drink, but then it's heart that was just sort of flame grilled. And I've tried that before, and it's really not nice. I don't like it. Beef heart. I can't eat shit like that, right? So that makes it sort of, but they have a lot more traditional food, I think, than what we do. Our traditional food would be mainly European foods that we've sort of adapted, I think, a little. No campfire grilled crocodiles with palm tree leaves. Crocodile we don't really eat at all here. Audiobook. In fact, I think most people, if you told them let's have crocodile, they would find it a bit distasteful. They would probably just be like, no, thanks. That's fine. We don't technically, we rarely eat things that eat other things. Right? So we don't really eat animals that consume other animals. And that means crocodile is sort of off the menu. If you go to like meat festivals and stuff here, you'll find exotic meat like crocodile. But it's only there, and then it's usually just like a taster. It's not meant to be a thing, really. Snobby, how you doing, bro? Yeah, there's meat festivals. Where everything meat is celebrated. Not cock, though, but everything else. Growfile, how you doing, fam? What the hell is spotted dick? It's a kind of fish, right? Spotted dick. What's the new idea, Mercer? It's a type of pudding. Spotted dick is a kind of pudding? It's a steamed pudding with raisins in. It's weird. Mercer, we do react to food videos every once in a while. I don't do the whole plan streams ahead, but every once in a while we do react to food videos. Like, stick around long enough, you'll find us go down the rabbit hole of what is food, and then just react to a shit ton of food videos. So it does happen from time to time. A dick used to be a term for pudding. Drainaman, you bastard, with a 5 community subs. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to read some arts in chat, please. Thank you, fam. You're far too kind. The old dude who burned the sandwich got me dying. Oh, shit. That may have been one of the funniest videos I've ever watched in my life. That guy ruined a normal sandwich. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it, but it was wild. Expect me on the 1st of each month. You will be expected, gentlemen. You will be expected. I appreciate the 5 subs, dude. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Is the 1st usually payday for people? I feel like most people get paid on like the 25th. At least here in South Africa, most people will get paid between the 21st and the 25th of each month. I don't know of many people that get paid on the 1st. The problem with being paid on the 1st is most of my... So I couldn't be paid on the 1st because most of my debit orders go through on the 1st. But literally the night of the 1st. So if I got paid on the 1st and the money doesn't clear fast enough and I didn't have any other like funds in my account, they would all bounce, which would be a fuck up. And I generally don't, because all my debit orders go through on my normal account and all my money is in my credit account. So, yeah, I literally only leave my salary in there until the debit orders go off and then it moves to the credit account. So that would be a fuck up. Dude, it's official. I'm a subscriber. Thanks to the kind soul gifting it. Bro, if you want to thank Drenaman, get on your knees and smile like a donut. That's the way it works in this chat. If someone gives a sub, you have to suck his dick. New rule. Imagine getting paid. Feels weird, man. Yeah, well, you know. It happens for some of the rich people, right? Is that it's so serious? You don't have to suck his dick if you don't want to. Well, it doesn't work here, but you are welcome. Oh, shit. Drenaman doesn't want his dick sucked. How does that go? Who doesn't want their dick sucked? Tries to remember who gifted me a sub? Oh shit. Albiwar really wants to suck a dick. Someone who has none? You can still suck someone off even if they don't have a dick. I'll let chat work that one out, right? But could still work. Right? Could still be done. It's not quite sucking, but it's kind of the same thing. Time for a strap-on then? Dude, we're not talking about sex here. There shall be no penetration. It shall only be canalingus, as they call it. That's how far you may go with this. Says the man talking about his trip to Meat Fest. Dude, the meat feast is above board, man. It's good. It's fucking brilliant. There's some crazy types of meat out there. Just chilling, some casual blowjob. Why not? What's wrong with a casual blowjob? Everyone likes it. Everyone knows it's good for you. Someone, I don't want to say, I don't know who, right? Because I don't know who leaves and who doesn't. But I'm on the Twitch page, yeah. I usually am on the Twitch page when we start the streams. And we had 12,803 followers, right? Before we started talking about get on your knees and smile like a donut. There's one person, at least in this chat, that went, that is disgusting. I will unsub from this. I will unfollow this fucking asshole immediately. This is a disgusting line of discussion. So, sad to be you, fuck. Imagine following, right? Imagine being in this chat and not knowing that it is just absolute filth. And then listening to the filthful conversation and being like, oh, this is just wrong. This is just wrong. I thought he was joking when he called this the most degenerate chat on Twitch. We have kind of food based and they charge for normal shit like threefold potato twisters for €7. No, on this one, what you get usually when you go to the meat fest, it's one price. So you pay a single price and then everything else is free. So you can eat as much meat as you want effectively. We've seen the leaks of the Warhammer 40k book, The End and Death, Part 1, second to last book in Heresy series. Crazy lore dump and confirmation on stuff with a lot of curveballs, crazy stuff. I have not seen that yet, no, but I would be interested in getting that book. Got your hands on those 59 Horus books? No, they're going to be sending it still. Mr. Demoria said he's building like a package of stuff that he wants to send. So I can't wait to get into the books because I've been trying now to no avail to get into the audiobooks, and I am not enjoying the audiobooks at all. I don't get into I get completely like twisted around and then I forget I'm actually fucking listening to an audiobook, and then before I realize I've missed like 2 chapters of the audiobook. So now I have to go back, but I can't remember where I have to go back to because, you know, I didn't pay attention effectively. It's a fuck up. Wait, the end and the death part 1 is in the pack. Oh, shit. Oh, shit. That's going to be good. Can you make him a VP? Yeah, of course we can. Of course we can. You know what I fucking hate? Yeah, that should work. I hate the fact that Twitch doesn't allow you to just click on someone's name and make them VIP or, you know, make them mod. You have to literally type it into chat. But there you go, Mr. Demuria, you are now a VIP of the channel. And I do believe that it is well-deserved. Absolutely. Have you guys seen that Arcs of Omen story with Angron involved? I don't know how Imperium can climb out of the dump it is in if they keep taking Owls like that. I've heard that Angron is on a fucking tear. I've heard that. That's not good. I don't want the Imperium to die. VIP is just sort of like a nice status, Mr. Demuria. It's just for people that sort of, you know, if they gift a lot of subs or they, you know, they do something cool in the stream, they get VIP. It's a way to manipulate you into doing more cool things, if that makes sense, right? So we're using psychology to get you to do more cool things so I make more money. That's effectively why VIP exists. It's really nothing. It's the equivalent of getting a gold star in class, if you remember that shit, right? Emotech, thanks for the follow, bro. Really appreciate that. Welcome to the channel. Thank you. But yeah, it's like a gold star. And then because you get a gold star, you feel like, holy shit, this is so cool. This must be important. I must do more of this. This is why some people end up gifting like 70,000 US fucking dollars in donations because they want the VIP symbol, because they think that's going to get them, you know, an in with the ladies, as it were. Not that it works, but, you know, I'm still hoping. That's why I'm in Amaranth's chat every evening. Just hanging out, you know, gifting all that fucking subs. Because it's going to work eventually, right? Now, Akko holds more power over you. He can threaten with taking VIP away. Oh, shit. I didn't think about that. That's some reverse shit, right? Hey, if you don't fucking give me subs, you're losing VIP status, fam. So there I am with the mod rank when the VIP one is less work. True. That's just how I rope it in. You want to be mod? It's really cool. You get to do all the work and you get nothing else. Dude, being a mod on Twitch is probably a bit of a schmoz. Gentlemen, hey, I don't mind the support, but I do mind the psychological bullshit that goes into a lot of these moves. Like, for example, the VIP badge. It is a psychological trick, because technically speaking, VIP is nothing extra, nothing brilliant. But I know how a lot of streamers use the VIP badge in order to sort of, shall we say, manipulate their viewers into stuff. I don't like the manipulations of anything. Like, for example, when you guys keep, let's say, for example, a bunch of you sub now, one after the other. There's a reason why I call that train, you guys know the donation train that pops up, that Twitch does? There's a reason why I called it the Scamas train. Because that's genuinely why it was designed. That's why Twitch made it. Because psychologically, some people will see that thing pop up and they'll immediately think to themselves, shit, I want to fill this bar up. I want to push this bar to the next level. So I'm going to gift 5 subs. And then another guy sees this and goes, wait, I'll gift 5 subs as well. Let's see how high we can make this thing go. It's nothing. It means nothing, right? It has no value other than the fact that viewers are manipulated out of their money. And I'm a firm believer in paying someone what you think they're worth. So if you love my streams, you love hanging out, you find it entertaining, and you sub, fuck yeah. I feel like I deserve that because you enjoy being here. I entertain you for whatever stupid reason, but I give you some version of entertainment, right? It's a transaction. You get something, I get something, we're both happy. But if you gift 10 subs because you were psychologically tricked by something that was literally designed to trick you, I don't feel good about that. I'm still going to take the money because I'm a heartless fucking capitalist, right? But I don't feel good about it. Because I didn't deserve those 10 subs. You were tricked into giving those 10 subs. This is like, yeah, it's just something that I really don't like. Steers with cold hard cash? Yeah, man. I cry in my fucking mansion every night. You should get paid for what you're worth. Then you owe us money? Oh, shit. Imagine being called out like that. Fuck. I am so bad that I have to pay you guys in order to be here? Shit. This is not a good business strategy. Dude, as I said yesterday, I was sad I couldn't sub to you, to be honest. I find you genuinely honest. Mercer, I really appreciate that. And I know what it's like living in a country that, you know, fucks you over constantly with bullshit. But I just appreciate you being here, man. If you guys weren't here, I would be talking to myself, and that would be fucking sad. Right? There's nothing more sad than a guy sitting in front of his computer talking to himself. Let's be honest. That shit would be sad. So the fact that you guys are here means I'm not crazy. At least, not yet. And that's fine. That's the best we can hope for here. Are we ready to jump into the reactions, or do you guys need a couple more minutes? Do you have some last minute wanks to take care of? You know, maybe fondle your balls a bit. Some blowjobs to hand out to your significant other. Maybe a coffee. You know, maybe a post-fuck salad or something. Can we go? grab some wine. Post-fuck wine is good too. I can wag while we react. Oh, shit. I don't know if I'm comfortable with that, but all right. But nah, let's wait for Echo reaction. All right, good. Which reaction do you guys want to start with? Do you want to start with Ian as he cost this, or do you want to start with the Diablo update? Because I'm good with either. I genuinely don't mind. You guys want to start with the Ian one? Salad is really pre-fuck food. I don't know if you want to eat before you fuck, though. You don't want to fuck someone on a full stomach. Diablo, then Ian. Okay, wait, I'm running a poll. Screw it. You guys are giving me mixed signals here. I'm running a poll. Alright, new poll. What should we start with? Diablo? Ian interview. Start the poll and view the results. Let's see. Let's see. Come on. Vote, people. Let's hear it. They're both super long. Tenfold. Both well over an hour. Alright, I see the Ian one winning out. I see, wow, the Diablo one is seemingly making a comeback, although I don't think it's gonna win at all. Tatiana, how you doing? Grofal, how you doing, fam? I don't know. We might do some 40k later today, but these two interviews are gonna take a while. Like, the Ian one is an hour and 22 minutes. The Diablo one is an hour and 39 minutes. If you add the normal 2.5 to my reacts, which is usually how that goes. When we react to a video, it's usually 2.5 times longer than the original. We're looking at a good 6-hour stream here. Just off of 2 videos. So, that's why I said, fucking strap in. This is some crazy reacts that we're going to be having here. You don't see a poll? It should be at the top of your chat. So if you look at the top of chat, you should be able to vote here. I'm really looking forward to Diablo. This Diablo looks fantastic. It looks like Blizzard have finally figured out why Diablo 3 was such a ball ache, and now they're going back to their roots with Diablo 4. There are some... I think, for example, on Android and iPhone, people don't see polls. So if you're watching on your mobile device, there's a good chance that you won't see polls. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense, Mew. So, I don't know why mobile and shit don't work, or sometimes don't work. I know a lot of people complain when they're on mobile, they don't see it. I'm going to run one more ad just so we don't get interrupted too much during the video. Now is your time to quickly go grab some coffee. It's going to be 3 minutes. I'm still going to be here. I'm not going to go anywhere. I don't need to pee now. And then we're going to watch the interview. I'm on iPhone and can see vote. Yeah, it seems to be maybe intermittently that happens. So, I know whenever people complain that they can't see the polls, it is almost always because they're on mobile. So it seems like some mobile phones, or maybe every once in a while, mobile phones don't show the ads, the polls. For some reason, they just don't get through the polls because it's the same color and I can't see it. It blends in. Yeah, it doesn't stand out enough, right? It should actually just pop up over your send a message thing. So you know where you would normally send a message? It should just pop up there that there's a poll. Would you like to vote, or would you like to just type something? I don't know why it's at the top of chat. Because, yeah, I've watched streamers before and they say they're doing a poll and I don't even see the fucking poll. Wait, it's 3 minutes? What is this? I don't want to watch this. For fuck's sake. Bell. 2 months, part of the Legion Nation. Appreciate you. Thank you. What is this? Have it on. If I could time you out, I fucking would. Go fuck yourself. I will. What the fuck was that? I will. Why do you? Why would you think I would watch that? Why would you think that that would be something that I would care to watch? That is the most weeaboo thing. I watched 4 seconds of it, and I already want to go take a fucking shower to get the weeaboo off me. That is the kind of shit that gets people completely fucked. That's just horrible. Why would you think I would watch that? It's just, what the hell? When the ad gets along, it's 3 minutes, Tatiana. Or it should be just 3 minutes. Can I time him out? I don't know if I can time out mods. No. I can actually. There you go. Abaddon. Go fuck yourself, fam. You're a mod, but you should have known better. You should have fucking known better. Like, take your 600 seconds. Go chill out for a while. That shit was not fucking on. I don't want to see crap like that on my main YouTube fucking watch account as well. Now for the next month, I'm going to be served with, oh my god, did you see this new K-pop band coming out? Did you see fucking whatever BT, whatever the fuck boy band bullshit comes out? I'm going to be dealing with weeaboo crap in my timeline for the next month. This is horrible. Why would you do this? You deserve the 600 seconds. This is why I look at random shit on a private browser. Oh my god, this is disgusting. Master Shaw, how you doing, bro? It's not beautiful. It's disgusting. I don't care for weeaboo shit. Like, why couldn't you just show me a nice, beautiful girl or some shit, you know? Let's look at some sexy tits or something. But why must I watch weeaboo crap? I don't know what kawaii means. Is that just a different word for weeaboo? Got some Tao propaganda? Dear Guala, you say we can't melee, but neither can you when you are shot from 3 miles away. Curious. Dude, you Tao guys try so hard to be edgy. It doesn't work, man. It means cute in Japanese? I don't know that. Wait, kawaii is actually the Japanese word for cute. It doesn't sound the same, does it? Watch this to repair your YouTube algorithm. Masculine power affirmations for men. Dominant alpha abundance mindset. Strong and independent. What?
Affirmations for men. Masculine energy. Without apology.
If you need to watch a video like this just to get your dick hard, you're a fucking beta cuck. Like, just what are you talking about? Like, if you need a YouTube video every morning just to motivate you into being a proper man, you're a cuck. Like, there's no way that you need this shit. Just wake up, grab your balls and dick, and go, yep, I'm a guy. Let's get on with life. Like, this shit is not necessary. You don't need to go through this crap every day. Look, it's not hard being a guy. You have dick, you have balls, you're good, right? Grow yourself a beard, feel good about yourself. Life's good. You don't have to watch YouTube videos feeling like, oh my god, you know, I need to get into my masculine energy or whatever. You're in your masculine energy, just fucking accept it. Some guys don't have male role models, then get one. Watch a bit of Rambo. You know, you're good. Like, if you need a role model, a male role model, watch Rocky or Rambo or some shit. What the fuck is going on? I'm about to sleep. What the fuck? Grumfield chat is being spastic. Any 80s action movie? Yeah, basically. Or or just be a man. You know, just be a dude. Just fucking live your life. Just don't give a fuck and be happy. You ever watch any anime? What the hell is anime? Oh my god. The names, bro. Why is there so many fucking different names for weird shit on the internet? No, Mr. Namuria, I do not watch anime. I have watched two technical animes, I guess, in my life. The one is the League of Legends one. I can't remember what it's called now, but I really like that one. And the other one is Cyberpunk. Really like that one as well. But that's just because I like League of Legends. Arcane is the one, yeah. And the other one is Cyberpunk. But that's just because I like Cyberpunk. Otherwise, I wouldn't watch anime. Star Wars animation is great. I don't want to watch animation. I like live action. I prefer live action. I got into a bit of a... Shit, yeah. Like the other day, I rewatched a couple of WoW cinematics. Couldn't help myself. Just really had to. Dude, if the cinematics, if the expansions could live up to the cinematics, it would have been so good. Let me show you guys. Let me just show you, right? Because these cinematics are so good. And yet the expansions were so bad. Like, just... So I rewatched this the other day. Actually, it started with this. It started with this. This one. So I started with this song. And then that led into a whole, let's watch some cinematics. I don't think many people understand why the Savannah story is so emotional. Savannah is highborn. You have to understand what that means in Alvan culture. She's highborn. They were the creme de la creme of Alvan society. She was a noble in Alvan society. And she got done so terribly by Arthas. She was the ranger general of her people. That means that the people's protection, the people's safety is her responsibility. Arthas used that, turned her into his banshee, and then used her to kill the very people that she was meant to protect. And what's worse, we got an insight into what that mind control looks like. You're not mind controlled and convinced that what you're doing is the right thing. You know, while you're in there, that what you're doing is a what the fuck am I doing? You just can't stop it. You have no control over yourself. It's getting good now. Just listen to this. It's getting good. That bull, dude. The fucking bull. That's amazing. She's no longer mind-controlled, Master Joel. But then this, so it's on Patty Matson's YouTube channel. But then this led me into this. Right? Because of the For the Horde thing. And I was like, fuck, this cinematic was so good. And yet the game was so bad. But the cinematic was so good. Just take a look at this. And just realize that these cinematics had no right being this good. They're way too good for the expansion that they were attached to. I was so hyped when I saw this cinematic for the first time, bro. We went over this cinematic for hours, days even, trying to find everything.
A cycle of hatred. Alliances forged and broken. We have paid the price for sharing this world. And we have forgotten what makes us strong.
Close ranks! Advance has won! Lordaeron will be ours!
My
king,
we have
her cornered.
Oh shit, with another gifted sub, Drenaman. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hearts in chat. Drenaman, I really appreciate the gifted sub.
Keep firing!
This is why I say the story has to have changed, or had to have changed. Because look at what Savannah is doing here. Look at her seeing what just happened to Sao Fang, seeing what's happening to the Horde soldiers, and there's a genuine thing that spurs her to movement. You can't tell me that this Sylvanas from these cinematics matches the story that eventually would take place. Her realizing what had gone on, and then, like, why? If she genuinely didn't give a shit, why pretend to? Dude, when she fucking yelled that, I wanted to lose my mind. As a Horde loyalist, this was the most epic moment in Horde history, was this moment. Like, holy fuck. Just look at this again. Bronze bastard, you be both. Oh yeah. Fuck me. shit.
Stand as one for the Alliance!
Dude, this is fuck. It is pride. There's something here which just... So if you look at this, now with all the information that we have, there's one of two conclusions that you can draw from this, right? Conclusion number one is that there was clearly a rewrite at some point. Savannah genuinely seemed to care about the Horde at this point still. She genuinely wanted to fight for what the Horde cared about. And the fact that Anduin was willing to engage in the fight. The reason I say that there had to be, listen to the first words here. Just the first words. Now that we know what we know, right? Just listen to this.
Ours is a cycle of hatred. Alliances forged and broken. We have paid the price for sharing this world. And we have forgotten what makes us strong.
We have paid the price for sharing this world, and we have forgotten what made us strong. Which is war, which is what I said way back in the day. War is always how the Horde and the Alliance have made themselves strong. It's what kept them on their toes. It's what drove us. And it felt like that is what Sylvanas wanted to reignite, is that war between the Horde and the Alliance, which is why this smile right at the end here from Sylvanas is telling, right? That smile there is telling, because she knows that this moment will now cement that war between the Horde and the Alliance. And this war will ultimately lead to a stronger Horde and a stronger Alliance. That's just the logic behind WoW. It's always been the logic behind WoW. As we fight, we become better because we come up with better weapons and better equipment and shit like this. And then, of course, now we know that's not what happened. So the other option here, looking back at this now, and we imagine that this was always the story that they wanted to tell, Sylvanas wanted to weaken both the Horde and the Alliance for Zuval's penultimate takeover, right? That was her goal. The goal was to weaken the Horde and the Alliance so that she could ultimately defeat them both, and that would mean that Zuval is the supreme leader and dominates everyone. I just don't know if I buy that. I genuinely don't know if I buy that. Not fully, at least. Anyways, I kept on watching more cinematics after this, but I won't bore you guys with all the cinematics that I kept going through, trying to figure out what have I missed with this story. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of watching the cinematics, because I do think there's a lot of story there. Or she meant free will makes us strong, but I don't know. Well, This is another reason why it's so weird what happened to Savannahs, because Savannahs have always cared about free will. This was actually one of the pillars on which the Forsaken society is founded, is free will. What's this? Oh.
Ragnarok! For Ragnarok and the Alliance!
Yeah, they could have done the movie better. This movie looked so bad. I don't agree. I thought the movie was really good. For what it was, I enjoyed the movie. As a movie, so if I were to criticize it as a moviegoer or as a movie critic, it was bad. But as someone that knew the story going into it, I thought it was really good. They shouldn't have tried to tell the full history of World of Warcraft. They should have just gone with the author's story, because I think the author's story would have worked just fine. The author's story is sort of a story that you can tell on your own. You don't need to know much of the backstory of the rest of World of Warcraft in order to tell the author's story. I think World of Warcraft would be far better served by movies that tell the individual sort of moments of things within the history of WoW, rather than trying to tell a story of the whole history of WoW. Because the problem with the WoW movie is it starts wrong. If you really want to do the full story of World of Warcraft, well, you've started in the wrong place, haven't you? That movie had to start at least 10 years earlier. Because you have to start with how the orcs finally became united under the banner of the demons. That's where you would have to start with that movie. And they couldn't start there, because then it would literally have just been an orc movie. So, yeah, it would never have worked. Anyways, let's get into... You guys said you wanted to watch the Preach video first, so we'll start with the Preach video. We'll just hit record here, because I am going to upload this one to YouTube. The Diablo one will go on to the React channel, the Clips channel. So, if you missed this, that's where you can watch it.
Hey everybody, we are going to be looking at our full interview with Ian Hazzikostas, who gave up so much of his time while we were at Blizzard campus in order to have a conversation with us about so many...
I've been looking forward to this video for, like, literally since he released the montage of interviews, because there's obviously a lot of things that didn't go into the montage, which more often than not is considered to be the unimportant bits, but for someone that really cares about the story and structure of WoW, those unimportant bits is actually the most important bits. So I've been looking forward to all of these behind-the-scenes interviews in full. So let's see if there's any like really cool pieces of information that we can glean from this.
Many things. We can only use little segments of it in the videos that you got to see. So here's the full thing. We will be releasing them all on YouTube eventually. If you are one of our website supporters or a Twitch subscriber, they are already up on our website for you guys to check. But don't worry, if you can't support us that way, they will be coming to YouTube shortly. Enjoy.
Here we go, boys.
Did you find that in the casuals as well?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, part of it was the pros, to the extent that there were ever any upsides of not being able to swap. Those very quickly went away after 9.0 as the stories converged. Mm-hmm. Right? I think early on, there was some novelty, I think, and something interesting about I, as a Night Fae, was playing through this story. My friend, who's a Venthyr, had totally different stuff going on. But really, by 9.1, all the Covenants were aligned. And so it was like you weren't really seeing anything different or cool than your friends in other Covenants. You just had,
kind of on the same road.
You just had the restriction now.
Yeah, I see. Was there any other talk of... Because I loved actually...
To be fair, though, that That was always going to be the problem, right? Because you had one or two ways to go with when you make a decision like that, you have one or two ways to go. The one way is every patch releases exclusive stories for every single covenant, and the covenants never come together. You just play these individual stories for every single one of the covenants, which means a lot of work for patches, because you're basically constantly designing 4 different storylines for every single covenant, and you have to make sure that every single one of those storylines is epic in its own way. You could do that, but then, how much work will those patches take in order to get out? So you were always going to bring them together, which means the lack of choice was always going to become relatively arbitrary after a while.
I love the Covenant idea. Like, I really did. Because when you push the RPG idea, and I was like, this is amazing. Because what I pictured, and obviously the old armchair dev idea, but what I pictured is that you would kind of commit to one, but you could leave it. It wouldn't affect any power source or anything, right? So it went that way. Leaving would actually cause them to dislike you, but you could also earn things like if you left Venthia to join, say, Kyrian, maybe there's a title to be in there, like you're the Daywalker now, something like that, and you would that became the RPG side for me. I was like, that's where they're going to go with it, is this storytelling about your allegiances to the Covenants and things like that. Was there talk about that stuff, or was it always going to be sort of like more gameplay oriented stuff?
I think that could have been really cool. One of there were early ideas of like pitches of were the Covenants themselves rivals, were they themselves like almost conflicting factions, kind of like the Elder Scryer thing, where there was some hostility between them. We ended up kind of pivoting away from that. It felt more like just forces that would come to quickly work together after Denathrius's betrayal and everything else. And so I think the moving between Covenants became more about just the gameplay and us asking the question of, do we want respecking Covenant to be a thing you do from boss to boss, or from, this activity to the other? And early on, we can talk about this more at length, it was, a lot of it was chasing the idea of meaningful choice, as we talked about it at length.
See, this is sort of where, Holy, how you doing, man? This is sort of where World of Warcraft's gameplay first mentality, and I will qualify this because I realize there are a lot of people that watch my videos and that's in my streams that don't play WoW. World of Warcraft has a gameplay first philosophy, which means the story is important to WoW. Make no mistake, they do care about the story, but they will never sacrifice gameplay for story. They would much rather sacrifice story for gameplay, which they do all the time. The lore oftentimes has to be sacrificed at the expense of gameplay. In some cases, it doesn't really matter, like teleports, for example. The ability to open a portal for people to teleport through. Lore-wise, this is incredibly taxing on the person opening the portal. Lore-wise, if you open a portal for people to go through, you need days to recuperate. Even if you are incredibly powerful, it takes you a few hours to gather your strength again, because it does tax you. You're moving physical beings from one spot to another. Obviously, you can't have that. What good would a mage be opening a portal and then suddenly the mage can't do damage, like 80% damage reduction, because the mage is taxed for the next 2 hours, right? That would just not work, really. So oftentimes the lore has to take a back seat to gameplay, but this is one of those times where that philosophy bites you in the ass, because you're thinking from the mindset of gameplay first, which means every decision you make comes down to, well, how will this affect the gameplay? When in reality, if the Covenants were just purely story and cosmetic choices, I think people would have been fine with it. If all the Covenants had was story, and you join one of these Covenants, and you are now one of these Covenant members, but your powers is complete or run completely opposite to that, or run completely independent of that, I think people would have responded to Covenants a lot more kindly and a lot more friendly. Because the Covenants is really just a cosmetic choice. It doesn't affect your gameplay at all. But sadly, if you have a gameplay first mentality, you're gonna want gameplay in every decision that is made. And the problem with meaningful choice when it comes to gameplay, in a single player game, that's fine, right? Because in a single player game, it doesn't really matter. You're gonna make your decision and that's what you're gonna make. In a multiplayer game that is online, that has competition within it, this becomes a massive problem. Because, well, I don't want to fall behind. And if on one boss, Maldraxxus or the Necrolords is the base covenant, but on the next boss, Ardenweald is the base covenant, I'm going to feel fucked from boss to boss. Right? On the boss where the Necrolords is the base, I'm like, woo, Necrolords. But then on the very next boss, I'm like, dude, why am I middle of the pack? I need to switch to Ardenweald, but I can't because the game doesn't allow that. So this will always be a problem that you will have with that philosophy, which means it's better to just stay away from choices that lock people into things like power levels.
And I think going back to this is like an ongoing internal debate among the team was how much have we lost by removing friction over the years? How much by streamlining things, by making things swappable and convenient? Is there a sense of depth in some way that has been lost in World of Warcraft? When we think back to Classic, think back to Burning Crusade, and as we were making these decisions in Shadowlands, Classic came out in the middle of that, in the middle of the development cycle, but we hadn't fully kind of integrated and learned from seeing the modern player base go back to the 2004-2005 game.
Do you remember, because you're obviously a vanilla player like I am, do you remember enjoying the respec cost? Or did you feel, because I remember my perspective was as a warrior, is I was the main tank, so I would swap to PvP for the weekend, and I'd have to do an announcement, to the guild. I'd be like, guys, just letting you know, I'm going to be PvP spec this weekend. I'm not tanking any dungeons or anything, and then that would cause some internal conflicts and strife. And it's like, well, I can't.
Deaths are coming with the prime sub. Really appreciate that, bro. Thank you. Welcome to the most degenerate chat on Twitch. Really appreciate it, fam. Appreciate a fantastic follow-up about this and the stuff Ibarra said. We'll watch that in a minute. I'm trying to think what Preach just asked there. I didn't like it. The respec costs was a really big problem. But since that was all you were used to, it was fine at the time. Because, well, what else was there, right? This was just how things went. What else could you possibly do? I wonder what Ian's going to say here.
Can't just swap back and forth. But you were shaman always?
I was a shaman back then, but I mean, I think I don't know that I enjoyed it, but I respected it, and it modified my gameplay. And I think that, as the raid leader, we had a range of, I think warriors were a good example in particular of people impacted by this. We had one, diehard, always there for the raid, full prot spec tank who didn't like
Shield
PvP.
vanilla?
Exactly.
Big time.
Exactly. By halfway through, for Molten Core, Blackwing Lair era, that was just a terrible spec.
Yes.
It was a little bit after that, the Shield Discipline days and all of that craziness.
I remember being considered a noob if you had Shield Slam. This guy's trash.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolute
It was
trash.
good. It was everyone else, and then almost everyone else was, I think it was 31.515 was the spec, where you had Mortal Strike, but still some threat generation.
Yeah, you just had Last Stand. You had to go to Last Stand. That was it.
Exactly. And that's what most of our warriors ran, and they could PvP with it, and they could off-tank with it, and it was fine. And that was part of just, that kind of became their identity. Then we had the one hardcore PvP guy who was just we brought him along. I mean, nice guy, good player, but he just made it very clear, I'm only here to get loot to PvP with, and if you need to sit me, but this is who I am. You
respect that, right?
Totally, and it was fine. And back then, I mean, you could easily succeed in that content with that range of players, even doing things on a relatively cutting edge level by vanilla standards.
The most horrifying screenshot I have, Ian, is my Molten Core guild, because I recorded back then, 3 30-second fraps.
See, that's one of the key words that Ian just said there. Back then, you could get away with technically the wrong spec. You could get away with having, fraps. But you could get away with that. Why? Because, boss design was, and we saw it now with classic guilds going in, fighting Ragnaros and basically killing him within like a couple of tries. Why? Because the bosses weren't really that difficult. They were difficult at the time, but they were mainly difficult because people weren't used to having 40 people needing to try and figure out how to all not get hit by shit. That's basically it, right? You just don't get hit by shit and you'll be able to kill it. Let's be real. Bosses in today's World of Warcraft is a hell of a lot more advanced. It's not just a case of don't be hit by shit. There is also extreme min-maxing that goes on into fighting a boss. There's minuscule movements that could really make a giant difference in how you play the game. There's targeted ad switching. When do you switch to an ad? Sometimes you have to ignore the ads for very specific reasons. All of this stuff makes a giant difference to how the game is played now. So back then, having something like a respec cost was fine, because even if you did a boss not in the quote-unquote optimal spec, who cares, right? You are technically good enough to kill this boss. You just have to learn how to do everything correctly. Nowadays, the incorrect spec can literally be the difference between a kill and a wipe, because you can see it. Oftentimes, you have guilds that will kill the boss seconds before the boss enrages. That means that if just 2 of your DPS were in a worse DPS spec, you didn't kill that boss. Simple as. The boss did not die because 2 of your DPS weren't doing enough DPS at the time. Tanks sometimes survive with less than 5% HP, which means they have to be in the perfect spec in order to survive every single hit that comes their way, which wasn't really the case all that much back in the day. Abaddon, welcome back, bro. Never again will you suggest kawaii bullshit in our fucking, in the chat, right? And I'm not a mod. I'll give you mod back now.
There's a guy running around in a pirate hat. This is pre-transmog, obviously. And I'm like, we really allowed this at the time. Like, this was fine. He was like an orc warlock running around in a pirate hat. And we did fine. It was totally fine. And it's hard to... Now we're so specialized. Yeah. I mean, it really is bleeding edge. That's something there is lost. Because I played with a lot of very fun people that are still... People I would like to know today. I know some of them today, but they were trash. But it didn't matter. Yeah. And that was like a... But I also remember, like, that's not a golden nostalgia thing. Because I think back to the TBC launch when they were cutting the raid, and I knew 15 people who were dead instantly. I was like, you're out. Without a question. And it was... I don't know, I guess that was the start of it starting to become a little bit more specialized. Because obviously when it was Sunwell...
Especially also, yeah, I mean, even before Sunwell, I think before all the nerfs, like pre-2.1... Like early Gruul, early Magtheridon.
Yeah. Look at that footage, boys.
Those fights were, I think, like they picked up where Nax left off in a lot of ways, right? It really felt like they took a tier that was kind of at the difficulty level of the end of Classic and began Burning Crusade at that point.
What with the trash? Remember that Magtheridon trash before you nerf?
Well, Magtheridon. And then also, don't forget like 45-minute respawn Leothir's trash, where you like clear the whole room so you can ping-pong him around, you wipe twice, then the first things start to respawn.
I remember Hydros. Like, getting to Hydros was... an hour and a half our first time, I think, something like that. And then it respawned as we got to the boss. That was a crazy period of time. That was Dark Ages. But fun in a way.
And no one really knew how to play. Even what seemed like at the time the best players in the world. In retrospect, it's been interesting to see that unfold over the course of Burning Crusade Classic, and like, sort of at what point did knowledge back then catch up to knowledge today? And you look back and you can look at videos of the old like world first Sunwell clears and like Nihilum and SK Gaming and top guilds in the world method, and you just assume like, okay, those are really, really good players. Then you realize that like almost every one of the Sunwell groups that you're seeing in the top 20 today has all of their members out DPSing what was being done back then
by considerable margins. By the way, like, it's pretty weird. Even the because Hunters used to play with the macro back then. I don't know if that exists on TBC. Classic.
Yep.
Is it still there? Did they keep that?
I'm actually...
It was mouse wheel for them. They would sit mouse wheel all night.
100% remember my mouse wheel Hunters. I don't know... I'm actually not 100% sure if that functionality is retained.
You could kind of do that as a Warlock as well, for those of you that don't know what they're referring to. hunters back in the days of TBC could build an add-on. This was when add-ons could still do this. You no longer really can do add-ons like this. But back then you would have cost, and then you would have cost sequence. Macros, sorry. Cost and cost sequence. And these were very different. So cost sequence, you could sort of build an entire rotation on a singular macro. So what hunters would do is they would basically put all of their abilities in a casting sequence, and they would tie that to the mouse wheel. So you would have hunters literally just scrolling. That's it. They're just scrolling, and every scroll is just hitting a different ability. And that's all they would do. That's the whole fight. As a warlock, you could do this as well, but you have to be very careful with your timings, because not all of your spells worked out exactly in that way. But basically, you would lose a couple of DPS, but all of your things would go into a single button, and it would not be a problem at all. These days, obviously, rotations would never allow for that. You wouldn't be able to do it these days. Because, first of all, game design have become a lot more intuitive and also a lot more clever. But also because bosses are just no longer stand still and just do one thing, right? It's no longer how that works.
I think it would be.
Because they made grid and stuff work, which you didn't have in vanilla. And I was like, this is cheating. Like, I was a priest for a lot of it, and it's like, you didn't know if anybody was stood near you. Like, the fact that you have grid and distance indicators is cheating.
I mean, by vanilla standard, I think by vanilla standards, there's a flip side there. I think very, very early on, yeah, we were clueless. Like, this is going way back. Like, my first Molten Core raid, well before I was a raid leader, I was just tagging along with a bunch of people. It was like, who's level 60? Let's go in and check out Molten Core. We made our raid of Lucifron. And I remember, like, just dying on Lucifron because I didn't have a priest in my party to dispel me.
Oh my god.
And no one had raid, like, literally no one had raid frames.
I would have dispelled you.
It literally was like, if there isn't someone in your party who can dispel you, no one's going to target you and help you. And then, I mean, obviously things pretty rapidly evolved. But by the end of vanilla, as you remember, there were like, right, it was smart healing. You could just have a keybind that would auto heal the lowest health person. Decursive to auto target that stuff.
Decursive is crazy.
Cast canceling, so, you know, 0.2 seconds before your cast is going to complete.
That was considered such a high skill, right?
Memories.
I mean, this is probably leading more towards where we are now in Dragonflight.
Yeah.
But you'll remember, like, a high skill thing was, say, patchwork. Cancelling a spell as a healer by jumping was considered pretty top tier, and you would have done totem twisting, I assume.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, which was, we had players who couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Like, and then you realize it's just, how can you not do this? This is crazy that you can't do this. And now, like you said, the skill of the
Patchwork,
level, or the skill level of the average player base, where do you see that is
fight.
now, like when you're thinking about creating content for people? Because we have rumors, right? I think that's where it come from, like Proving Grounds. We're a kind of good idea. It's like teach you attacking from behind, interrupting. But then I know as a content creator who was creating guides, I got a ton of messages from people who just could not do it.
Yeah.
And saying, is that reflected in your numbers? Did you feel like it brick-walled so many players?
Honestly, in Warlords, when we briefly had Silver Proving Grounds as a requirement to queue Heroics, it did brick-wall a lot of players. And what we saw, and I think this was, Proving Grounds is a concept I'd actually love to see us revisit and expand upon.
I would too. I would too. For those of you that don't know what they're referring to, maybe you didn't play during these days, you couldn't do heroic dungeons until you completed the Proving Grounds at least silver level. The Proving Grounds, I think, is one of the greatest things Blizzard ever introduced to the game. And they should have kept the Proving Grounds, and they should have moved it up. Number one, the Proving Grounds would have been really cool if you kept stacking it up in difficulty. So, you know, high-end players could still do, like, Platinum level or Challenger level, and it just becomes harder and harder and harder, because it's really fun to sort of test yourself and see how good you actually are on your class. But most importantly, it would teach everyone how to play the game. The only thing that I would probably not do is tie it to being able to do dungeons. So that was their big mistake, was you couldn't do heroic dungeons unless you completed Silver Proving Grounds. This is a problem, because now what do you do with a person that can't do the Proving Grounds? Because on some classes, it's actually pretty easy. Like my Rogue, I did it without even thinking. Rogue has an interrupt had an interrupt every 7 seconds or some shit like that. So basically you can interrupt everything. Burst is no problem. On my Warlock, I had to think a lot more in order to get the Proving Grounds done. Because your Warlock only has an interrupt. At that point, it was once every 40 seconds or 44 seconds. So you can't just interrupt. You have to interrupt, you have to fear, you have to stun. So you really have to think about the abilities that you're going to be using. So I can see how for some players that would be a massive deterrent on being able to actually do these things. But I do think it's important for players to learn how to play the game. And I think something like Proving Grounds does exactly that. I really think Blizzard should bring this back.
A big flaw with it back in the day was it didn't really teach you. It was a safe environment in which to practice.
Mm-hmm.
But if you had just fundamental misunderstandings about what you should be doing or how to play, it wasn't really giving you tips. It wasn't saying, here's why you failed, what can you do better? And you had to go to external sources to get that information. And frankly, a lot of the players who most needed that kind of training were the ones who weren't going to external sources in the first place, or they wouldn't have.
Yeah, because I think this is pre when you had, because now you've got the quite large pop-ups of like, try attacking it from the back. You know, that kind of thing happens now, but I don't think they had that originally. Was it just a debuff? Takes no damage from the front or something?
Exactly.
So you're expecting a new player to also read debuff tooltips.
Yeah, I mean, I think what it had going for it was a safe environment. No one was going to make fun of you. No one was going to kick you from the group. No one was going to, you didn't have to feel guilty or awkward about not being able to do it. And the hope was that you could practice. But yeah, I mean, I think there's one of the challenges in designing anything for World of Warcraft is just the incredibly vast skill gap. The spectrum
is
from
ridiculous, right? Yeah, it really is, and that's got to be because it's always been found that challenges like the game's too easy. But I always reverted back to the age limit on it. It's still designed for teenagers, right? Like and I look at my kids now, and they're trash. They're trash at video games. Like it's painful.
I'm sorry.
I am sorry too. You think I would do better, but it's not worked at all. Roblox is the way they're going.
I mean, these days, honestly, I don't know. I think
fault.
these days probably it's. Maybe I'm stereotyping here, but I feel like it's the teenagers, the young people with better reflexes who are probably just actually, yeah, exactly. Actually, I mean, speaking frankly, personally, I'm a way worse player than I was 10 years ago.
Right on board.
Right, and for me, it's a mix of I don't have the same amount of time to just maintain the muscle memory that's required, but also it is just I notice multitasking and raid leading and trying to do a mechanic while also keeping track of two other things that I need to be doing at the same time. I could do that no problem 10 years ago, and now I'm conscious of the fact that I'm missing some things.
I feel it the same way. Like I would say my peak was Wrath of the Lich King. That was my method days and things like that. And then after that, I don't know where it was just a case of reaching that pinnacle and being like, it's not for me. I didn't love it. I loved doing content creation instead. And then coming back, it's like, I don't need to do that anymore. I don't need to invest 10,000 hours on a dummy.
At the same
you
moment.
shouldn't be expected to either.
Same
I can still clear the content. I don't need to be that good. I can still kill N'Zoth. It's fine. I can make all that happen. But one of the questions before we get into the big change that's happened is when you're creating content for the player base that is ever changing, how do you decide the approach for your personal views? Because you come from the old school like me. Of what an MMO was probably like. And we did a lot of research on, when it launched, based very heavily on EverQuest, and instantly met resistance because people were like, no, we didn't actually like that. So you had a big group of devs who played this hardcore style MMO and were happy to sit in a dungeon environment all day waiting for people to show up. And then World of Warcraft comes along. And no, we don't. The casual, the majority is like, we hate that. That's awful. It's so bad. And then you look at Wayland Cameron's design and Ulderman, but that's changing all the time from where you came from. It's like, how are you keeping that connection
These are
with
graphics,
the demands
boys.
of a player base who seemingly even doesn't like playing with other people these days, in some cases?
I think, but that last bit, I think that's always been the case, right? I think actually one of the big original claims to fame of World of Warcraft was you could solo to max level. You could not do that in FF11, EverQuest. Other games at the time, it was okay, you can get your first 5 levels solo. Now you have to find a group if you want to get anything done, or you might as well just log off. And so I think that's always been an undercurrent of the appeal of World of Warcraft. There's such a wide...
It's wild that at the time when, EverQuest came out, the graphics were mind-blowing. At the time. People saw those graphics and they thought, dude, it can't get better than this. There's no way they can get better than this. And now you look back at that and you go, bro, what the hell happened? Like, how are we this far from that? And back then you thought that was really good, right? That holy shit. Just look at that. I'll never forget seeing World of Warcraft for the first time and thinking, bro, this is peak graphics. This is the best that MMOs can ever be. And I remember telling my friends, you can't have brilliant graphics in an MMO. It wouldn't work. No one's PC would be able to run it. And nowadays you have games like Elder Scrolls Online, where it's still an old game, but it still looks fucking fantastic, right? And it's running just fine. So it's actually kind of wild to think how far we've come.
Range of playstyles and preferences. I think for every person who's there to, challenge themselves and push to accomplish difficult things with 4 friends or 19 friends or whatever else, there's someone who views it as almost a meditative experience. They just want to unwind after a rough day at work and log on their hunter, log on their druid, log on their paladin, whatever, and just explore, bounce around, accomplish some goals, get some achievements done, get some cosmetics, whatever else. And both are equally important. Both are part of the collective world that makes it a world, as opposed to a niche game for a single play style.
I mean, you serve so many different player types, right? I mean, I'm not sure how your metrics work, but one of the questions, because I think it's really tough when you're out there and you're not just a content creator, but you're anybody. The vast majority is a horrible, horrific term that gets thrown around all the time in reference to World of Warcraft. This is what the vast majority likes.
I've done this before, and I am super guilty of this. This interview is actually the thing that opened my mind to it. And I see it now in my comment section so often where people will go, dude, the vast majority of players don't give a fuck about the lore. I'm like, dude, how do you know? Did you ask? Like, have you gone around and asked every single player? Or someone will say the vast majority of players does Mythic Plus. It's like, did you ask? Like, did you go around and ask the vast majority of players whether or not they do Mythic Plus? Because I did this. Because you assume that because you do things, right, and you like those things, and you see other people that do those same things and like those things, that must be the vast majority of people. But the more I speak to people that actually know this stuff, because I do have a couple of people that work at Blizzard that I speak to from time to time, the more I realize that, dude, the vast majority is a thing that literally doesn't exist in World of Warcraft. There is no such thing as a vast majority. The vast majority only works if you say the vast majority of players are casual. That's the only time it works. Because that's the only truth in World of Warcraft. The vast majority of players are casual. But casual isn't just one thing. There's not just this is casual. Because casual also means normal and heroic dungeons or Mythic Zero dungeons is considered to be casual. There's players that don't do any of that. Collecting mounts and pets is considered casual. But there's players that don't do that either. So, yeah, there's genuinely, there is no vast majority. So for all the times that I have used that term in the past, I sincerely apologize. Because, yeah, it is misleading, and it's nowhere near true.
What do people actually do in the game? Because we don't know.
I mean, everything. Honestly, I mean, I think that's one of the quirks of WoW. It's part of the magic of WoW. It's part of what makes designing for WoW really challenging at times. I think you could take a dozen people, all of whom would say WoW is their primary game. It's one of their favorite games, the game they play a ton. You could sit them around a table and have them talk about what they do in the game and why they like it. Mm-hmm. And it could sound like they're describing 12 different games or experiences that would be foreign to the others. It really is everything from the, completionist solo collector to the casual PvPer who just queues Battlegrounds all weekend, to the hardcore PvPer who wants to push high rating, to the Mythic Plus focus player, to the casual raider, to the hardcore raider, to everything in between. And then all the different Venn diagram overlaps. And all of those people are World of Warcraft players.
Yeah.
And it's and I think the world is, again, as I said earlier, richer because it has all of them in it. But a challenge is, there is no majority, so to speak. It's a collection of many minorities, each of whom have different and sometimes competing interests. Yeah. And I think that's part of the challenge when it comes to listening, addressing feedback. I think, often the two are a little bit conflated, where hearing feedback should mean, in the eyes of players, and understandably so, well, do what I say. We told you I told you I don't like this. We told you we don't like this, and you didn't change it. Therefore, you're clearly not listening.
Especially if that person believes they're a reasonable person. I'm a reasonable person, and I think you're incorrect. So,
and they are, and they are a reasonable person, and I think it's totally reasonable to want to advocate.
Rob, how you doing, bro? If you're gonna ask questions that has nothing to do with the video, try and leave them for the end of the video, because I'm not gonna stop the reaction to this interview to answer a question that really doesn't relate to the video now, because it will break the entire flow of the video. But I'd be happy to answer your questions at the end of the video. Very happy to do so. But yeah, just finish this video and then we can get into questions.
For the game that you want to play and the play style that you favor. And it's our job to take everybody's concerns into account. It's not a player's concern to take other people's happiness into their account when playing a game. They just want what's going to make it the most fun for them. Mm-hmm. And so, I think the challenge comes where sometimes those desires are directly conflicting. Where,
You got an example?
Yeah, I mean, I think rewards are a clear case.
I'd love to get into this with you.
Yeah, right. It's basically the people who want to do a thing and don't see any value in it and want it to be more rewarding, versus the people who don't want to be forced to do the thing and want it to stay not rewarding at all. Or should PvE gear have any place in PvP, or vice versa? And to some extent, like we can continue to separate out the ecosystems to solve these problems. We can say there's no crossover whatsoever, and you're basically playing a completely different game if you're doing this activity versus that activity. Or to the extent that there's crossover, there's going to be some people who would prefer it weren't that way.
For sure, because, I mean, one of the most common things, and I'm guilty of this, and what I can also honestly say after now we're here is, I definitely got to the point where I was so immersed in it and not happy that I definitely went overboard with where I was, which I think is the place you end up with because of a business relation. Is like, ordinarily I just put the game down. Yeah. But you often, when we were talking about the reward structures of the last sort of since Legion, if we start from there, is just make it cosmetic. There's such an easy get out of jail to throw in there. And I thought this particularly about Suramar, because when we did the playtesting of Suramar, I was like, this is incredible.
Suramar was fucking amazing.
Is just wonderful. And then very quickly as we got to release, huge AP rewards started to arrive and incentives. And I often believe this with a lot of the development that's happened over the years with you guys, is I don't know whether it's an internal pressure, and I kind of think this goes back all the way to Naxxramas, the original one, where it's like, we've invested time and money into this content, but if we don't make them go, they're not going to go. And it's that something that's a very real thing.
I think it is a real thing. I think make is maybe too strong a word, but if we don't incentivize it, if we don't make it feel like you are progressing in some way as a result of it, then yeah, people probably won't do it. And I think if we made a zone...
See, this is the one place where I finally now reach a disagreement with Ian. Because I come down on the side of, so what? If you make something, and the vast majority of players do not do it, so what? You shouldn't want everyone to do everything. You see, because the problem with providing an incentive for players to do something is, for some players, that is truly just an incentive, right? Oh my god, I get to do this really fun thing, and also I get to get some stuff for my legendary. Torghast is a good example of this, right? Some people, like myself, really enjoy Torghast. So for me, the ash that I got at the end of a Torghast run was just a nice cherry on top, because I really enjoy Torghast. So it doesn't matter that, I have to do it because I want to do it in the first place. For other players that hate Torghast, the ash that they need for their legendary forces them to do Torghast. So it's almost always a case of, so what? And this is where creating evergreen content solves that problem. If you make content that will always be available and that will always be engaging to players, you don't need all of the player base to get into it right now. Because eventually players will get bored, and then maybe some players will go explore something that they've never done before. And it's fine, because they didn't miss anything the first time they didn't do it, but now they can appreciate it and they can enjoy it. So I do think that the problem with incentives is, for one person it is an incentive, for another person it's a force. And that the person that is now being forced to do something that they don't want to do gets very angry at the thing that they're being forced to do that they don't want to do, but they have to because of the incentives that's tied to it.
Zone full of awesome quests that literally offered no rewards, as a hypothetical, right? No experience, no gold, no items, nothing at all, but it's really cool content. Most people wouldn't touch it. People who did might touch it once.
Actually.
And that's not to say that, the people who would do it, if you're doing it to level, who would do it if you're doing it to get a profession recipe, to whatever, are going to dislike it as a result. But at the end of the day, it is a game that, as part of just the core RPG progression, you have a lot of goals, you're making your numbers go up, you're trying to overcome challenges, you're choosing how to spend your often limited time these days wisely, and you're going to spend that time doing things that are getting you closer to your goals. Maybe, like, at the end of an expansion when you have no more other goals left, you might go back and chase cosmetics or do things that, you haven't had a chance to just for completionist's sake. But those feel like lost opportunities when there's something out there that has potential that's just underutilized.
Yeah, so where do you draw the line then in being incentivizing it via power? So, it's Torghast throwing the legendary requirement into there, versus this gives you a cool mount. Do you see a distinct difference in participation? Because it's like, they'll just look at it. And I guess a good example of this would actually be challenge modes.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you know the participation rates there, which were purely cosmetic rewards, right? That's all that challenge modes gave you, was just a transmog. And did that come across as perhaps a failure? Because not enough people did it?
I don't think challenge modes were a failure, no. Their participation was overall quite low. It got a bit better. I want to say, if I remember, towards the end of Mists, I think we added a decent chunk of Valor for doing challenge mode runs that helped, it helped justify it to people who were just looking to cap their Valor for the week. They could at least work towards something else at the same time. But it wasn't seen as a failure, because I think it also, as someone who worked very directly on challenge modes, 10 years ago, it wasn't 30 people laboring to make this thing. It was, let's try an extra difficulty, let's add an extra overlay on the content we're already making. And for the people who got a lot of value out of it, and a lot of enjoyment out of it, that felt well worth what we put.
Imagine if Torghast had... Imagine if the Ash from Torghast could buy you cosmetics from a vendor that always gets new cosmetics added to it. Like, every expansion, there's new cosmetics being added. So Soul Ash didn't buy the legendary. It only added more and more cosmetics that you could buy with your Soul Ash. Would that not solve that problem almost immediately? Where every expansion, people have a reason to go run Torghast because there's Soul Ash, and the Soul Ash buys really cool cosmetic items. I think that could solve the problem of, no one's going to be doing it because no one cares to do it because there's nothing in there. Legendary gear takes enough effort that they really should continue past the one expansion they're really useful in. Rob the Fool, I do agree with you. Personally, I like the fact that there's no legendary gear in this one, because I do think legendaries used to be cool when it was just one legendary per expansion, and that was the only legendary, although I understand why they moved away from that, because it only felt cool for the classes that could actually use the legendary. All the classes that couldn't use the legendary, they got screwed, right? That entire expansion was a wash for them. One thing I always wanted Soul Ash to be used for would be the Torghast cosmetics, but instead they tied Phantasma to it. Yeah, I mean, there's a number of things that I think they could have done with Torghast that would have solved all of those issues almost immediately. When everyone has a legendary, it kind of makes them feel less important. Very much agree. They don't feel like legendary items at that point. They feel like just another item that just has a different border. But it's not a legendary item, because a legendary item used to come with a massive storyline attached to it. You would basically grind all of the expansion to get everything together to build your legendary. And then you would only really utilize your legendary in the final expansion, or the final patch, right? The final raid, you would finally have your full-blown, fully charged legendary, let's go kind of thing, right? Oh, not for all of them, but for a lot of them. And that was really cool for players that finally had that. Of course, no one else had it. But then again, I never cared. When Shadowmoon, for example, during Wrath of the Lich King was a thing, I didn't care as a Warlock that, oh my god, I couldn't use Shadowmoon. I was still having my fun, right? This was just an extra fun thing. And I actually started leveling a DK just so that I could eventually do the Shadowmoon, until I realized that I'm not in the mood to do all of this for a DK that I don't want to play, really. So I ended up not getting Shadowmoon on my DK. But yeah, you know, I feel like the other cool thing about the legendary system as it used to be, where you would have one legendary per expansion, is it would oftentimes incentivize players to roll a new alt. Because a lot of players don't do different characters, right? A lot of players will have their, say, mage, and they do everything just on their mage. But when you have, say, daggers coming out for rogues, and, you know, that's all there is, right? If you're a rogue player, you can use these daggers, no one else can. You might get that mage to go, dude, I want to see that story. I want to get that weapon. Let me roll a rogue and let me go get those legendary items so I can also see what this entire thing is about. So I do think there's some pros and cons to it, obviously.
Put into it. But I think, yeah, you're correct. When we're looking at a major expansion feature like a Torghast, if that were only used by as many people as did missed challenge modes, that would have been seen as a significant failure. It's like we put a ton of time, design resources, engineering, art, iteration into this. If only 8% of our players did it, well then we should really, we should have just put those resources into something else that 90% of our players were going to do.
Or just make it evergreen,
we would have made more of our players
and then
happy.
it doesn't matter.
At the end of the day, like that's the challenge we're trying to solve. It's we have a finite team, even as we grow, even as we hire, we have this many, person hours of work that can be done this year.
Sophia with the 5 community subs. Ladies and gentlemen, can we get some hearts in chat, please? Thank you, thank you, thank you. You're far too kind. How are you doing, Sophia?
How do we deploy those? How do we allocate those in the way that's going to make the most fun for the most players?
Well, one of the things in Dragonflight that's changing is because obviously part of what I would consider the failure of Torghast is that people felt. I know that one of the reasons I stopped playing was I'd log on to my alt, and it was like, okay, I kind of need to farm a legendary, I kind of need to conduits, I kind of need to do this. And as somebody, as I'm sure you're aware, I was a huge champion of Torghast. Like I had a great interview with Morgan about Torghast, and then a lot of it changed. And I was like, this is just killing my soul. It made me very unhappy. It's like, where do you then? Is that just a case of looking at alt friendliness for that, or is this in Dragonflight where you actually have completely smashed this out of the park?
There's a few pieces to that. I think even aside from alt friendliness, which was clearly an issue there, I think that the mandatory weekly loop, the feeling that you have to do this basically every week, essentially forever.
Rob the Fool, this is, in fact, you're asking the question that I've been asking for a while myself. Ian said this. He said that the challenge with WoW is that you have 12 people in a room, and you ask 12 people, what kind of game do you play? They all play WoW, but it sounds like they're not playing WoW, right? Like, everyone is just playing their own game because 12 people are doing completely different things in the game. Well, then the answer to that is to design the game for all 12 of those people, which means if you have Torghast and only 8% of the player base does Torghast, well, then it means you need something else for another 8%, and something else for another 8%, and something else for another 8%. And why not? The only way to justify that, though, is to make Torghast evergreen. So keep updating Torghast. You've already done the work, right? The engineering is done, everything is done. Now just keep adding to it. So, for example, bring out Torghast levels that is more Dragonflight themed now. It's still Torghast. You can still go in there and you can still do things there. And there's cosmetics and stuff there. But now you have some Dragonflight themed levels in there as well. And players can just really enjoy that shit. And then, you have different things for different people, and everyone finds their little thing that they like doing. So basically, what I'm talking about is compartmentalized development. And sadly, and I know a lot of WoW players hate when we compare World of Warcraft to Final Fantasy, but that's exactly what Yoshi P and his team does. they design things exactly in this manner, where they have things in the game that it's not going to be done by the vast majority of players, and that's okay. They don't care. Because if you don't want to do it, then it just means that that wasn't designed for you. And they don't do it every patch. It's not like every patch they bring out a feature for every single person that plays the game. Every patch there's something new. Like islands, for example, was added in Final Fantasy recently. Those islands isn't for everyone. Not every player is going to do islands, because not every player is going to give a shit about having their own island. But those islands now exist, and this means that every expansion, they can add new things to the island for those players that like the island. And the players that don't give a shit about the island, well, that's just not for you. You don't have to do it. There's going to be other things for you in the game as well. Maybe a new ultimate, or a new raid, or new dungeons, and new dungeon systems, and things like that. So there's always something added in every patch for a specific group of the player base. And over time, that grows into a juggernaut of a collection of activities for all players to enjoy in the game.
And if you miss a week, you're falling behind. And if you put it off, I think that's something that got us thinking a lot about just the player psychology of how people approach mandatory things with expiration date, perceived chores, like that feeling of maybe it's Monday or I guess Tuesday if you're in Europe, and
Wednesday.
the last day of the week is what I'm talking about.
Oh,
so
okay,
Tuesday,
okay.
if you're in
Tuesday,
Europe,
yeah, all right.
you had a long day at work, then you went out for dinner with your friends, with your loved ones, whatever. You come home, you're exhausted, and you realize like, oh crap, I haven't done my Torghast run
Been
for
there
the
many
week.
times.
Exactly. Does that make you feel good about World of Warcraft in that moment?
No.
Absolutely not. And so why are we doing that to people? And there's a lot of ways around that. There's, it's catch-up mechanisms so that, if you knew that if you missed it this week, you could just catch up and do 2 next week or whatever, suddenly the psychology is very different. If there's more flexibility and, you can do multiple weeks in a row, or if there's just less, if it's less of an exclusive reward that only comes from this one source, now suddenly it's fine. Yeah, you're tired tonight, you had fun doing other things, you don't have to log in when you don't want to. But in any case, getting back to Torghast, I think, yeah, it was gameplay that was kind of forced to overstay its welcome in a lot of ways because it became something that you had to keep doing.
Dude, listening to Ian say the things that I've been saying for 4 years now is so satisfying that they've reached that point. They've reached that epiphany moment where they've realized, okay, wait a second. Why are we punishing the player base with things that they don't care about? And I recognize there's some players that don't feel punished by Torghast, and that's fine, right? But that just means that you're part of that group that really like Torghast, and that's not a problem. But, there are players that hated it, and you can't say, well, screw the players that hated it. Everyone is paying the same amount of money for this game, which means that everyone has the right to at least find something that they like in the game, and you can't force your opinions onto others. You can't say, well, fuck you. You will keep paying. You won't complain. And also we're not going to make the game for you. That's just not how this works. Because if people keep complaining and no one listens, they'll just eventually stop paying. And if enough people stop paying, World of Warcraft is over. So then even you that didn't want the changes and didn't want people bitching and moaning about the game will end up not having a game at all. Because the game is dead, because everyone left that weren't happy with the game in the first place. So, it is sort of a... You see, because there's a lot of people that complain about Dragonflight now. And I have so much more sympathy now for the people that complain about Dragonflight, because I get where those complaints come from. Because there's people that really loved the chores in Shadowlands and the chores in BFA, and they feel like Dragonflight doesn't offer them these chores. There's nothing that they have to do every single day that keeps them busy. And this is where I think Blizzard needs to add that to the game. Add places in the game, systems in the game, where someone that wants those chores can go do those chores and can find something to do in the game. And it shouldn't be mandatory. It should be completely optional, but it should scratch that itch for that portion of the player base that doesn't mind. And the whole I'm bored as fuck with Dragonflight, that's not necessarily an argument that I would care about, because boredom is not always bad. I mean, the first patch have been out, or the base game have been out for quite a while now. The first major patch is on the PTR at the moment. Most people should be bored at this point with Dragonflight. It only means that you're going to be that much more hyped when the new thing comes out, because you've had that time to sort of cool down. You're bored, you're waiting for something new. Now the next patch comes out and you're like, oh shit, there's finally something new to do. And now you're very excited for it. There's nothing wrong with those cycles of, oh shit, yes, oh I'm bored, oh shit, yes, oh I'm bored. So that's not necessarily a problem, I think, because it's needed.
For as long as people did. Something that we've tried to pivot to, and I know you mentioned you didn't personally jump in and do Zereth Mortis.
No.
But part of how we approached the activities there, the Cypher system,
Zereth Mortis was actually
the outdoor
cool,
loop,
by the way.
Was basically we're going to give you a couple of weeks of the first couple of weeks. We're going to say, here's frankly a carrot that everyone's going to want. You want to get your second legendary. You want the ability to craft your Unity legendary. That's the second one that you can equip. Doing that's going to take you a couple of weeks of checking out the content. Past that, everything is 100% optional, but you've seen it all. And you can decide whether you like it or not. And if you like it, you've gotten a taste and you can keep going. And if you don't, cool, just never go back. You can ignore it and focus on Mythic Plus, raids, whatever else. It's a little bit of a middle ground between there being no mandatory power at all, where a lot of people who might have enjoyed the content will never even give it a chance because they're like, well, why am I going to do that? It doesn't give me anything. Or obviously the opposite end of the spectrum, where it just becomes an endless thing that you have to keep doing.
So you've taken a pretty hard stance at this. For my playtesting of Dragonflight, this has now become almost a core value of Blizzard going forward, or seemingly, but obviously we're here to talk about it today, is like just no more of that. No more mandatory stuff. And is there like...
Saber Raven, the problem is that you're always going to have to do some image rebuild, right? After the expansions that we've had, considering the fact that the last 4 years of WoW was an abject failure from everyone's perspective almost, except for the groups that really loved the chores of WoW. For everyone else, it was an abject failure. There's gonna have to be some level of rebuilding your image. And you can hear it from so many comments out there. People saying, I will never trust Blizzard again. And that's not entirely true. If Blizzard continues to release good games one after the other, we will all be back sucking the dick of Blizzard fairly soon. Because we love Blizzard. This is a company that most of us, at least in this chat, grew up with. I mean, I've been playing Blizzard games since I could walk, right? So Blizzard is part of my DNA in a way. So I'm always going to have a very, very special place in my heart for Blizzard Entertainment. It is by far the company in gaming that I care more about than any other company in gaming. Even though my favorite games are games like Mass Effect and Witcher, I don't know nearly as much about CD Projekt Red or EA or BioWare as I do about Blizzard. I know far more about Blizzard because this is my company. And my company made a boo-boo. They fucked some stuff up. But it doesn't matter because they can fix it. I just want them to fix it, right? And I think it will happen. I think they are on the right track. You can hear by what Ian is saying. They understand what mistakes they made. And they are, I think, willing to fix that.
An internal fear then is like, are we making stuff now that people aren't going to check out? And are we actually okay with that? Because a lot of games now are going with a more drop-in, drop-out style. And they're still maintaining a sub. Is that something... I mean, this is a risky move you're making in Dragonflight, I think, internally.
I think... So, the concept of mandatory, I do think only applies to a certain portion of the player base. I think it's certainly, a high-end competitive players, if there's any advantage that they can get, they have to get it. Well understood. But I think some of what we're also moving away from that lets us, like, systems like Renown, or Outdoor World Loop, they have powerful rewards from them. You can make, this profession crafting reagents at the end of a Renown tracks that will let you make 402 plus gear that is heroic raid quality. There are other, profession recipes and other things that people will look at and want. But the Mythic Raider who's looking to, push for the Hall of Fame isn't going to look at any of those things and say, oh no, this stuff I need from this that I can't get elsewhere, therefore I have to do it.
Yeah.
And some of that is just a product of moving away from the auxiliary, so-called borrowed power alternate advancement systems that we had in the last few expansions. Item level is kind of the simple universal reward. Item level is power, but it's fungible. You can get it from other sources, and it's only as valuable as how it compares to the other stuff you have access to, as opposed to artifact power, essences for your Heart of Azeroth, conduits, all those other things where it didn't matter how high your eye level was from other content, you had to do this because it was additive.
Mm-hmm. But they were great things, though. Like, it was always the acquisition that was the problem. Like, the actual result was great. I just don't want to farm 50,000 honor in Battlegrounds, Like, the actual system itself, and Azerite Armor in particular is one that I'm deeply upset about, because I genuinely thought
Rich was so
item level
angry
is
about
something,
Azerite
and
Armor.
again, it's personal bias, I have no issue with Mr. Does his World Quest having the same item level as Mythic Raider, but Azerite Armor seemed to perhaps open the door to be like, well, we can tailor this now to world questing and your experience. We can do it for PvP. We can do it for Mythic Plus, make 5-man more fun things. It didn't go that way, unfortunately. It was kind of the set bonuses throughout there. But now you are upping the rewards from Mythic Plus, giving those guys an actual appeasing people like JB, so we can actually stop raiding for the most part. And is that something that's also changing long term, or is there still an idea of if you're not raiding or doing high in Mythic Plus or high in PvP, you should still be a bit lower?
I think there's definitely a little bit of still a spectrum there. Eye level, is if you want 415, 421 type gear in Dragonflight, you're going to need to do high-end PvP, high-end raiding, high-end Mythic Plus.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fine with
we
that.
do want outdoor play and certainly professions to be able to push farther into that track than they ever have before. I think at times in the past it's felt like if you were a solo player, well, you kind of capped out at maybe you could get a couple of normal mode raid pieces, and otherwise you were like 30 eye levels behind the Mythic Raider. That's, I think, too large a gap, and something we'd like to close. And that's, really speaking, going back to some of the earlier conversation about player groups and silent majorities and so forth, we do feel like we have underserved the just solo outdoor focused player who chooses to spend tons and tons of time in World of Warcraft over the years, and they care about progression too.
Yep.
And I think it's often inaccurate to just assume, oh, well, because you're not trying to push high keys, why do you even need item level?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, people want the number to go up.
Exactly. Yeah, it's an argument I've made in the past. It's like, you really don't need, and we call it the mythic tax. A lot of players don't understand, when you're BIS or as best you can be, you've no idea, it crushes the rest of the game. Like, any new content that comes out is practically useless to you at every point. It's not a great place to be in that respect. Whereas if you're still chasing the carrot, everything that comes out is kind of tailored for you. You get a better experience that way. But obviously, item level is higher, and I would like to chase that and have it, and it's not fair I don't have it in many ways. And your new profession system, I kind of looked at it a different way. And I don't know if you saw my comments on it, on the feedback I gave. I've been talking to your guys for a while. It looks to me like it's new coat of paint, kind of does the same thing, but it looks like you're trying to target social elements with it by making the individual once again important. And I would love to get your thoughts on, like, do you feel that? I mean, I feel it's been lost. And looking at the success of Classic, it looks like people have gone back to, this is cool. You are Ian. You're not rogue, paladin, shaman. You're not just an NPC with a color that should be serving my needs in Mythic Plus or whatever. Is that a big element of the profession system?
Social gameplay is absolutely a huge piece of it. And I think it's something that really has been lost, or really has been underutilized over the years. I would actually say you really have to go back truly to Classic, to vanilla, to find a time where profession felt like a part of someone's identity in a meaningful way, where someone could be known as the enchanter on the server who had all the recipes and the high-end enchanting rod. People would seek them out, or the person in your guild who could make Arcanite Reapers or whatever, who you'd always hit up to get that done. Professions have remained relevant in a bunch of different ways. They were essential to success, making consumables and adding sockets to your gear and enchants and other things over the years. But it always felt like, okay, I just need to find an enchanter, a jewel crafter. I need someone to, just do this thing mechanically, and then I can stop thinking about it. We wanted to make sure that for the people who really like crafting, there is depth there. That being a blacksmith, being a tailor, could feel as much a part of your identity in terms of who you are, how you play World of Warcraft, as, oh yeah, I'm an arena player, or I'm a, priest who heals dungeons a lot. It's if you want to spend dozens and dozens of hours honing your tailoring skills and unlocking new potential and working to fill work orders and all of that, there should be rewards there for you.
Yeah, I look at it like,
I think that's a
I call
good
them Samuel
approach.
Tallies of the world, if you're familiar with
Yeah.
Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
And there's two parts to this. The one is that any fantasy story that's ever told, whether it be as good as Game of Thrones or any other, yes, they're the fighters, they're the warriors, and those I would segment as your people who look at their logs, they're like, I got 98%, I'm garbage, how do I get that, what button do I press? And then there's also the guys who are the more Samuel Tallies, who are like, I love supporting my group, and being a part, I'm still as important as those guys, because they can't facilitate themselves without me. And that comes in two ways. One is the professional side of
it's a
things,
good
which it looks
analogy.
like you're addressing, so that now those players, you'll be like, oh, you really want that pair of boots made? You should go and see Ian. He's the boots guy.
Yeah.
That's what I saw with this profession system. But the other side is in the combat, and Overwatch 2 kind of plays into this now, is the support role, which was very present.
From what I can gather, if you listen to how Ian is speaking, it does seem like Blizzard have made a mental shift. They've realized from a psychological perspective where they went wrong. Legion was a psychological perspective away from a lot of the old school classic World of Warcraft thinking, and they realized that doesn't work, not in the long term. It serves up too many problems that is almost not. It becomes insurmountable. After a while, there is just no way to develop things that people actually care about. The ultimate thing here, Kaleo, what Preach is describing here, and what that analogy serves, is hero archetypes. That's what it boils down to. Every single person, when they play a video game, has a specific hero archetype that they sort of want to put themselves in, right? This is who I want to be in this game. And for some people, that is the mage, right? The range spellcaster that is just dealing devastation from the back. For another person, it is that I take the damage. I'm the protector of the group, right? For the other person, it's the thief. It's the guy that lurks in the shadows and strikes at the most opportune moment. The assassin sort of thing. And for another person, it is the Samuel Tally. It's the guy that I don't fight. I don't attack. I help, right? So I build stuff for those that can fight. I provide knowledge. I provide, and that is a hero archetype that should be in the game. And I feel like Professions right now sort of dip its toe into it, but I do think there's still much that Blizzard can do with Professions to really drive home that hero archetype. That player that just wants to play the game for Professions, and that doesn't really want to raid. They don't want to do raids. They don't want to fight. They just want to build stuff. I think there's still a long way to go, but I do think we're on the right track, at least.
In Classic, Shamans in particular, is like, you know, I'm taking improved Wind Fury, and that's sacrificed somewhere else. Is that something you think's lost now in the numbers game that WoW has become?
That's a really good question. I mean, everybody loves power infusion, so a quick.
Oh God, they've but we tweeted yesterday we were here. I've had that message 5 times.
No, so I mean, clearly there's a lot of desire for more, people who are just there to enhance others and choose who gets to win meters and who doesn't. But no,
as long as it doesn't screw me over, that seems to be the argument.
Exactly. Just anyway. I'll get myself into trouble if I talk about bribing your guildmates for power infusion, but. No, there's something there that I think has been lost. Whether it was old school enhanced shaman, rep paladin, shadow priest in early BC, where it was like, even if you your job is just to make everybody do theirs better, and they were all grateful for your presence. And speaking frankly, it's fine that it's a lower skill floor, skill ceiling, however you want to call it, role.
I totally agree with you.
It's like there's a place for you. Your job in this role is not to top meters. It's not to be the superstar making all the pro plays. It's just to be part of the team.
Yeah.
finding a way to reintroduce that, I think, is something that we discuss. I don't know that we have a clear answer right now, but it's a place I'd love to see return to WoW grouping in some form.
100%.
Bro, if Blizzard brings back support classes in World of Warcraft, I will cream myself. I have wanted support classes in World of Warcraft for such a long time, because support classes, if done well, is and can be phenomenal. It doesn't have to be a low skill ceiling. It doesn't have to be that the player isn't very good, but they at least provide support. I think you can make support classes that are truly fucking phenomenal. And they're very difficult to master, easy to learn, very difficult to master, but if you do it correctly, it will pop off. And I think there's a lot of players that would want to play support. You know, you go into that raid and you don't really do damage. You just buff other people to be able to do that damage. Or you buff the tank to be able to take a lot of damage. This is your role. And while you're never going to be top DPS, you're not going to be the top tank, you're not going to be the top healer, this is your job. And you're happy doing this job because this is the hero archetype that you want to play as. And I think there's much that's been lost in World of Warcraft as a result of the removal of this. For those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, if you go way back, you don't even necessarily have to go that far back, because this was even something that existed in Mist of Pandaria. And even in World of Draenor, it was still there. Gilgamesh, by the way, 8 months, part of the DJ Nation. Appreciate your fam. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Paladins, with their Word of Glory, would oftentimes be a very big support class. They wouldn't always necessarily be top of the log, but a paladin could literally save your tank in an ocean moment. Like a good paladin with Word of Glory could take the tank from 0 health or 1% HP to 100% HP with a single well-timed Word of Glory. And there's a lot of paladins that absolutely loved that, because it's something that they care about. They want to play that support class. So I really do think that if Blizzard at least is talking about this, that is a good thing, in my opinion.
100%. I feel very, very bad, and we talked about this, I think, before with cameras were on, is in the 40-man raid environment, you could take weaker players, and it was fine, because they would often drift to these roles. They don't have that viciousness to be a top DPSer, the mind to be a predictive mind, to be a solid healer. They don't want to do that either. What they do want to do is help everybody else, like a bard role, essentially. But I know when they tried it with discipline in Kata, you're not going to do the top healing.
Yeah.
You're not going to do the best DPS, but you do both. And it's great. And everyone went, but Holy Pala does more. And this does more. And it's, I mean, you know your numbers background, obviously, we go back to Elite's Jerks. And I was there as well. It's so much about that now. And the influence of the top guys is very trickle down in WoW. And they're like, it's not this. The meta.
Yeah. No, that is something. That's something that's really present across all of gaming.
But I feel it can solve that.
And it's a huge challenge. And I think I don't know the answer to it. I know there's lots of game developers in any kind of multiplayer setting these days who are grappling with this question, this issue. It trickles very far down.
Yeah.
Right. There isn't the sense of, oh yes, if you're playing right at the cutting edge, then every percent matters. You need to do the thing that's absolutely the best. People just want to know, well, what's good? What specs should I play? What specs are good? What specs are not in Dragonflight? Even if they're never going to set foot in anything harder than normal rating. Even someone who avoids most of that stuff isn't necessarily actively seeking it out, almost can't help but stumble across it. They might be, going to Wowhead to see what's new in the game or what new piece of information dropped or see some cinematic, and then come across the article that, like, tier rankings of specs and realize that the thing they play is like D tier, and suddenly feel worse about themselves and have a bit less fun playing the game than they would have had, even though it's not getting in their way of their enjoyment of actually doing in-game content, just knowing, yeah, you're the worst. Or someone says you're the worst. And that content is pervasive, right? How much has that tier generator template been featured in how many content creators
on that website?
But at least, I mean, to be fair, in Max's defense, when he does it, he often brings in a wide range of experts and like debate
So the way you fix that, Bonk, because you are correct, there's plenty of classes that have quote-unquote support abilities in World of Warcraft. But the way you fix it to where people will absolutely want to play support classes is by making it necessary. So by making sure that support classes do have a fundamental role in the game. So if you don't have a support class, it's not that you can't do the raid without a support class, but the raid will be fundamentally more challenging. Because your tank will have to be well and truly geared. So if you want to be a top tier raid guild, and you don't want to give gear to your tank because most top tier raid guilds don't give gear to the tanks, you're going to need a support healer there. Because your tank's going to get one shot if there's no support healer there. Or maybe your DPS is under geared, you might want to need some support gear, some support abilities that boost some of the DPS there. So it's all a question of design. At the end of the day, you're going to have to design for those support classes. WoW in its current design can't work because the current design of World of Warcraft is you have to have a tank and then your DPS have to be the best DPS that they can be. That's the current system in World of Warcraft, and you need to change that to something else. Better design philosophy centered around support classes existing. Now, where you become sort of shoehorned is with Mythic Plus. Mythic Plus is only 5 people. So what do you do with support classes now? Does that mean that every Mythic Plus group now needs a tank, a healer, 2 DPS, and a support? Because now you're making it even harder for Mythic Plus groups to actually exist. What support fits somewhere? So I do understand why it is such a difficult bridge to gap, right? Because you have so many different things in World of Warcraft that very intricately rely on class design.
It's it, and let's talk through how this happens. But those are everywhere, and yeah,
they're also easy money. There's from our perspective, it's like I should rank the tanks, even though the game's not finished. I think I did it once. So I was like, this is terrible.
Interesting
I'm doing
Apocalypse.
this again because it's not even accurate. It's like it's like assessing the damage of Evoker. Evoker's out on the alpha. Go and try it out. What's its DPS like? It's the first question I'll get. I was like,
yeah,
doesn't matter.
I mean, and really on that note, that's something that we've underestimated and learned from, and often learned some painful lessons from. I think returning to one of your favorite topics, covenants and covenant abilities. I think we could see in our internal data, and a lot of the same data that people could see, though we maybe had a broader base of it, the trends over time, and how early on pretty significant covenant diversity in the first couple of weeks gave way to increasing trends towards what was seen as the high-end meta. Yeah, what was seen as the high-end meta, people who were just solo players who never did group content were gravitating towards it over time as well. And that, kind of made us rethink a lot of our assumptions about, well, is this really just the top 10% that cares about it, or is it inescapable at this point? And
here's the question. How do you fix that, chat? How do you fix that? The mindset from the player base that this is a bad spec, I'm not playing it. Even though it's my favorite spec, I'm not playing it. Because there's a couple of things you can do right off the bat. You can ban damage meters. So in other words, you can't see how much damage your player is doing. There's a downside to that, which is riots in the streets of Orgrimmar and Stormwind, because players will lose their fucking shit when you ban damage meters from the game. But outside of banning damage meters, I don't see how... I genuinely don't see how you solve the issue. Because technically speaking, there is no such thing as a dead spec in World of Warcraft. It doesn't exist. If you go to the raid logs right now, you will see that every single DPS spec has cleared the raid on Mythic. That means that that spec isn't dead. The fact that that spec could do the raid on Mythic means that the spec isn't dead. The spec could kill the boss. Yet for some players, that spec is dead. Because that spec is not the top spec. And therefore, it's a dead spec. And the only reason people think it's a dead spec is because the damage meters tell them this spec isn't the best spec. So if you remove the damage meters, you inadvertently solve the issue because you can't see when you're not top DPS because there is no DPS meters to go off of. Final Fantasy does this. You might think that solves the issue, but guess what? Even in Final Fantasy, when you ask players which specs are best, there are specs that is considered in Final Fantasy as quote-unquote dead specs. Because yes, damage meters are technically banned, but people still have them. People still know what the damage meters are, and when the spec is not top, that spec is considered dead. And it is just what it is. So how do you solve that issue? Is it even solvable?
In modern gaming, and I think the answer is it's inescapable in modern gaming, and so let's not design systems.
So if you look at it as a bit of naivety, like you still have this sort of almost a belief. It's like, yeah, the top end, because I definitely felt in some of our discussions it was like, oh,
Kelio, so the way that I approached it was, this is why I said ban DPS meters, but take the same approach to the ban of DPS meters that Final Fantasy has to DPS meters, insofar as it is banned to have a DPS meter in Final Fantasy, but players still have it. The only time you get banned for running a DPS meter is if you get reported for harassing another player with your DPS meter. So if you went into a pug raid and you told another player, get your DPS up, it's too fucking low, you're bottom of the log, and that player reported you for use of a damage meter, then Final Fantasy will ban your account or suspend your account because you used the damage meter. Or the funny thing is, there's plenty of streamers that stream with their damage meters, and Yoshi P and them have never banned those players because it's sort of like the way I see it, at least, is it's a social contracting thing. So, if you are in a guild and the entire guild said, look, we're going to use damage meters, Final Fantasy doesn't seem to care too much about it. Because at the end of the day, everyone in there is fine. Everyone in there is happy with the damage meters, so they don't really care too much. The problem comes in when players are running with damage meters and they're harassing other players that didn't sign on to that contract. Right, so other players that they don't want DPS meters. They just want to play their class and have fun with it. But now or their job and have fun with it. Now you're forcing them to care about the damage meters, even though they don't give a shit about the damage meters, right? So personally, I would take that approach to it. So technically, you're not removing damage meters from the game. You are just saying, look, for those players that really care about damage meters, they can still install it and they can still, look at their own damage. And if they're in a guild where everyone is using it, that's fine. We're not going to ban you for it. But if a player reports you for harassing them using your damage meter, we're going to ban you. Because that's not necessary. This player is playing their fucking spec. They're having the time of their life. They're doing their job. It doesn't matter that they're bottom of the log. It's not up to you to tell them that they're not good. Because I can tell you, I'll do, because I don't raid anymore, right? I do the looking for raid stuff. That's where I live. And the big issue that I have with looking for raid is every single time I go into looking for raid, there's someone complaining about the bottom of the log DPS. The DPS that can't, top the meters. And I'm like, dude, this is looking for raid. Most of the people in here are in here because they don't have a fucking clue what they're doing. Why does that matter? That's why this was built, right? It was built for trash players. If it was built for high-tier players, it would not be called looking for raid, right? Like, stop harassing players that is here in the content that was built for them. You don't have a right to do that. You're destroying this guy's gameplay, and he doesn't care. He's just here to have fun. He doesn't even know what he's doing. It's fine. It's annoying.
Almost like a containers. It's like high-end stuff goes over here. That's Mike. We'll talk to him there. Casual stuff over here. PvP over here with Bajira, something like that. Where, as you said earlier, actually the player base is elastic, and it's all...
The problem in LFR with downing the boss is never DPS. If you're hitting the enrage timer in LFR because of DPS, then yes, maybe complain about the DPS. But the problem in LFR with bosses being killed, I have never been in an LFR where the problem was DPS. The problem is always people not doing the tactics. And feedback on not doing the tactics, that's a different thing to feedback on your bottom of the log, we're going to kick you. Right? It's like, no, you can't do that. This guy is here because he doesn't have gear and he can't play the game. This is meant for him. You're here. You shouldn't even be here. Right? Because why are you in... Like, I see this. People doing LFR... And they're like fucking, they're topping the log with like 3 times the DPS of the next person. And it's like, why are you here? Why are you in this? You don't need to do LFR. This is not your content. Now, I don't mind people that go into LFR and they're just sort of helping out because they didn't have anything else to do, but they're not complaining about anyone else. I'm talking about the guy at the top of the log now shitting on everyone else that isn't top of the log, but then you look at his gear and he's like 40 item levels above everyone else. It's like, dude, why are you in here? You don't have to be in here, right? These people do have to be in here because this content was built for them. It's their content.
It's mixed into its togetherness. And now it's like, is that something that's kind of gone away now? It's like, the information's going to find its way to even the most casual of players.
I think there are still certainly meaningful different segments of players and play styles and motivations and all of that. But I think that, yeah, the influence of min-maxing, of playing in the so-called right way, is something that at this point is a true majority thing. It is pervasive. And that was a miscalculation, right? And then it was naivety, if you want to call it that. I think, you know, when we spoke back in the run-up to Shadowlands, and to some extent, I fully knew that we knew that the high-end community was not going to like being locked into a single covenant and having to be suboptimal for either AoE or single target, for either Mythic Plus or, you know, raiding. But we thought that the upsides in terms of differentiation and strengthening your bond to the choice that you'd made for the majority of the player base that wasn't worrying about how am I going to both, you know, push for top Mythic Plus rankings and get in the Hall of Fame for raiding, we thought the upsides for them would outweigh it. What ended up being the case was that, no, basically, even the people who might have otherwise, in a vacuum, enjoyed that choice and the freedom, felt forced into a certain path just by the information that was trickling down.
Yeah, potentially. Certainly, if it comes to getting into dungeons and guilds, it's like, why are you playing that covenant, right? That's going to be a standard response that we've had since vanilla. It's like inspecting. I mean, we'll get to the talent trees now.
Yeah.
Often the case was you had to post your talent setup because, you know, you'll be like me. You can look at it in 2 seconds and go, noob, move on. You know, you're the optimal, which is, you know, you're correct, and even inspecting that way. And I think that's how it filters down, which must feel a little restrictive on you guys. It's like, even if we think this is a great idea, and in fact people are going to embrace it and maybe get their own unique identity, they're going to be blocked somewhere, which is why I was against the gameplay almost. It's like, that was our argument with the Covenant. It's like, just don't tie it to the gameplay, like RPG storytelling, because this is going to happen, regardless of whether we like it. So do you feel restricted on that?
A little bit, but I think we're restricted in a ton of ways, and I think part of design is just working around those constraints to try to deliver a fun experience for people at the end of the day. I think we know that, people are going to want to distill a range of options among things that give you power down to what is best, and they're going to want to optimize for different situations. And I think part of, the talent system that we have coming in Dragonflight was built with that, with full awareness, walking in, being like, yes, we're going to actually loosen restrictions on respeccing. We don't need tomes anymore. You don't need to go back to town. People are just going to want to, yes, you're going to want to change your spec from boss to boss. You're going to want to have a spec for trash. You're going to want to have a spec for these situations. And maybe it's fine. This talent is a niche talent. And this talent is a talent that's only going to help you in certain situations. But you'll feel smart when you switch to that and take it there. And I think, the original talent tree system we had back in, Classic through Wrath was still thought of more in the sense of weighty choices that you were rarely going to deviate from because of the escalating respec costs and all of that. As as sophistication at the time was growing, I think we just kind of went into this knowing that, yes, we're making a system for a modern player base that is going to want to change, going to want to be the best. Let's make that interesting. Let's make the process of figuring out
I love the new
what the right
talent
loadout is.
I love the new
for
talent
this
trees.
boss, part of the interest of the system. And then if you want to just ignore it entirely, you can just use a nice middle of the road spec that will get the job done in most situations.
My experience with that is, and you'll have the metrics on this, is people check their BIS talents or BIS whatever, start the game, and then they never change it. And I was utterly amazed because I want to say it was BFA, might have even been Legion.
Yeah.
You'd made tomes do something really stupid. I can't remember what it was, but it was like you had to be in like a certain place or you couldn't spot your talents or something.
Yeah.
I think you had to be in a major city to use a tome or respec or something. And I made a video.
Yeah.
I was like, this is outrageous. This is so annoying. So you're telling me if I need to swap this one talent, so I need mass entangle here and I need typhoon over here. I have to go back to the city to respec. This is infuriating. And I think 200,000 people watched that. And the comment section was full of, who respects? This isn't a big deal. We never respect.
Yeah.
And it's like we take that one talent at the beginning of the expansion, we go to a stream or we go to a website.
You see, the biggest problem, I think, is the amount of WoW players that don't know each other. Because I can tell you now, as a more casual player now, I don't respec. I have my spec, I have the spec that I like, and that's sort of it. I don't have to respec the content I do. I mean, unless you consider world content to be difficult, the content I do does not require massive amounts of input. I could probably do it with no talents and I'd be fine, right? But as a raider, I used to respec sometimes in between pulls. Because, it might be that one of our rogues can't do the ad. And so now I have to do the ad. And this means I have to respec. Because the spec that I had was more cleaving. But now I have to go for a more single target focus spec because I have to burst down the ad. And I can't focus on cleave now. And that means changing 2 abilities. Just 2. But those 2 abilities will increase my single target DPS by a ton and lower my wave clearing or my cleaving as a result of that. And you would definitely respec boss to boss. There wasn't a single boss where you would have the same talent build on for every single boss. It just wouldn't work. But of course, if you're a very casual player, you don't even know that these things exist because you've never done it. And why would anyone ever need to do that? You have your talents. This is how you play. So I do think there's also a little bit of players don't know what other players go through, and players don't understand what other players have to go through. So it's almost always this push and pull of I complain about something that upsets me, and there's a portion of the community that thinks I'm simply complaining for the sake of complaining because this is not a problem. But that's only because they don't know that this is actually a problem.
That's the best one, or they choose one they like.
Yeah.
And they just never touch it again for the entire game. And is that something that's backed up internally, or is that like a niche that I happen to stumble upon?
No, I think that I think respecing is more common than it was back then, because I think there's more. Again, it's more common when you go to your guides on Icy Veins, Wowhead, whatever. You're going to see talent recommendations for specific situations that then make you think, okay, I'm going to switch between this and that. I think in practice it varies a lot among the type of row. There are some rows that are more a playstyle choice of like, what do you want your major cooldown to be? What do you want, this resource modifier to be? And you just pick that and you never change it. Some of the more pure utility rows of like, do you want to root here? Do you want to stun here? I think those are things that people will change more commonly.
Yeah, I loved it. I love changing my character. I love that flexibility, which is why I was so against the Covenants thing as well. It's like having this, playing in my character slightly differently keeps it fresh, keeps it interesting. I do this for Mythic Plus, depending on the affix, and then I go into Raid and do this. And I always feel such a sadness when it's like, well, I never respec. I never bother.
And I think so. A key thing to remember: there are plenty of players of players who feel exactly as you heard in your comments, and really for whom the entire system of class mechanics is frankly a chore.
Yeah.
That like class changes can be intimidating and off-putting for someone who actually sees their rotation as something they have to almost overcome in order to enjoy the game the way they want to, which is just exploring, questing, soloing stuff, collecting things. And every time we like change up talents or change up key abilities in a way that is super exciting to the high-end competitive player, perhaps, it's very frustrating to someone who is like, now I have to relearn half of how to play the game. Why do you keep doing this, Blizzard? And
so interesting to hear.
Again, we're trying to take all of that into account in building the Dragonflight talent system. That's why when everyone logs in this week, they'll have a pre-populated default build that's kind of that reflects what the starter builds we created are, so that no one has empty bars, and we're trying to largely replicate how classes used to play in Shadowlands as best possible. If you want to just switch to a starter build and never mess with the system at all, we have a pre-created build for every spec. We want to make sure that like there is complexity and depth there for those who want it, but the
What's interesting is the logic that players use. Because I've always been one of those players, when classes go through massive changes, it's exciting. You know, yes, you have to relearn everything. I remember back in the like heyday of World of Warcraft, going from TBC to Wrath of the Lich King, Warlocks changed entirely. And then from Wrath of the Lich King to Cataclysm, Warlocks again changed entirely. You basically spend the whole expansion learning how to play your class. Next expansion, you have to relearn everything. But this is fun, right? Because now you go back to the dummy and like, all right, let's get back into it. Let's learn. And you spend hours upon hours upon hours on the dummy, just learning your rotation, making sure you know how you're doing it and getting your muscle memory ready. But it's interesting to hear that there's a portion of the player base that looks at that and goes, fuck, how am I going? Fuck, I just want to play the game. I don't want to learn how to play my class again. Why are you changing things the whole goddamn time? Just let me play the game. That is very interesting to hear, because you never think about stuff like that.
Simplicity in the way to opt out for those who don't. And
I've been using this as my suspicion was, and I was talking to a few of the high-end guys about this. So it's like,
exactly.
It's like, oh, they're not putting anything majorly new in, and it's wasted. I was like, no, this is good, because this is a huge change for those players you're talking about. So the first time you're introducing it, you can kind of rebuild your Shadowlands character. You should understand pretty much what you're looking at, or use the pre-build. But next expansion, we're going to get a bit silly with it. We're going to have some fun. I mean, you've had this fear for how many years now of like, look, this game might go another 10 years. Are we going to end up with a talent roll that stretches as far as the eye can see?
I mean, and we'll see. I think this isn't a formal announcement, but I think our default plan going into the next expansion is, let's say you get 10 more levels, you're going to get 10 more talent points, you're going to see new options and added depth in the trees to spend them on like you did back in the day, right? It's as opposed to borrowed power, it's incremental layering on additional things and developing your character. Is that infinitely extensible? No. But we'll figure, like, it's just one of those things where, do we think that's going to work for us for the next, like, 4 to 6 years? Yeah. And that's kind of what we'd plan the system with in mind. Because really, if we planned it...
My suggestion here would be, do what you did with Cataclysm. In Cataclysm, Blizzard took the talent trees at that point that was getting pretty large, and they just condensed them down, right? So every 4 to 6 years, condense them. Take a lot of those talents that you had, merge them with some of the other talents, just bring the talent trees, back to a more manageable size, and then you're ready for the next 4 to 6 years. By now, you can add more talents because you've cleaned up the talent trees, as it were. I would just do that every 4 to 6 years. It's sort of like a soft reset, but it really isn't, because you don't lose any power by some of those abilities just becoming part of the other abilities. You're just gaining more power, and it doesn't turn into the fucking talent tree from Path of Exile, right? Because that shit will drive people crazy. You want to talk about, like, people being lost in WoW. Imagine if WoW had Path of Exile's talent tree. How many people do you think will continue playing?
To be infinitely future-proof, then we go back to Mist's talents, where it's like, okay, let's just not add points anymore, and let's not add rows.
Pretty much.
But at the end of the day, something, we need to be mindful stewards and caretakers of the future of our game and not paint ourselves into corners. But if it's not fun today, then 10 years from now is not going to matter. And we need to remind ourselves of that sometimes.
No, I think that's totally reasonable. Everything you did made sense with the new talents. I was like, no, this is fine. Your average Joe is going to be able to figure this out real easy and have fun with it and basically just rebuild that character. We've amongst all the Dragonflight changes that have come from the last 7 years of expansions, it's been so changed. But you've also had so much, and we've got to get into this, is like so much upheaval internally with COVID. We obviously had all the harassment stuff that came through and massive changes amongst the staff. Like, how have you dealt with that in terms of dealing with the motivation of the staff, the internal environment, and then pushing forward with an entirely new philosophy on the game for Dragonflight? It's got to have been a rough couple of years.
It's definitely been a challenging couple of years, but I think the team today is stronger and more tight-knit than we've ever been, having come through that and having, weathered it. I mean, COVID in 2020 was obviously, threw the whole world for a loop, to say the least, and, began a process for us of relearning a lot of sort of lifelong creative and collaborative processes of, how do you have what used to be the casual conversation around a whiteboard, or bouncing ideas off your office mate.
To talk about it yesterday, I mean, you built Shadowlands and Dragonflight, and you've been really generous. We've looked everywhere. I walked past John Haight's office yesterday. He's playing Diablo 4 already. Slacker. Mike Ibarra's office. So we got all the access, and there's nobody here. It's very, very strange, and in the creative environment, that's really hard. And you've done Shadowlands and Dragonflight in this new place, so it's got to have been, for you, who's leading the charge, it's like, okay, this is a lot of challenges to face.
I think it's.
I don't agree with that, Mew, because part of a talent tree, it's fine to have what is considered minor talents. So if you look currently at the World of Warcraft talents, you almost have minor talents, and then major talents. It's fine to have minor talents, the 5% damage increase. Because at the end of the day, talents should make you feel more powerful. And getting to a place where you get 10% increased haste or 10% extra damage, that does make you feel more powerful. It feels like you spent points and you got something out of that. There's nothing wrong with having that in a talent tree to make it feel good. But when you talk about the 4 to 6 years reset, those are the types of talents that you get rid of and you just sort of bake them into the spec, right? So now instead of having, say, 25 minor talents that just increase haste and, DPS or some shit, those are now baked into the base spec. And you've brought new talents out that's going to increase haste further, increase DPS further, but also then give you some really cool extra shit, if that makes sense.
It's been resolving some problems and figuring out systems and processes that work. And a lot of, I think a lot of what we've come up with, we would keep regardless. Even if we could all come back to the office tomorrow, there are certain meetings that we would have that we'd keep virtual forever.
It's not really about lazy design. It's about restrictions to what you can actually do. Because what you're asking for is, if you want to give someone a talent point every level, and what you're asking for is new abilities to be tied to every single one of those talents, how many abilities are you going to end up with? In 3 or 4 expansions, you're going to end up with 70 fucking abilities. Like, where do you put all of that? Like, how many of those abilities will actually be usable? It's going to be a nightmare. And you're going to have, like, so much crossover, because there's no way that, no matter how many developers you have, they're going to be able to think about every single expansion, think about every single spec getting 10 new abilities every single expansion. That's just not gonna happen. That's just never gonna happen. It's not gonna work. There has to be minor talents that make the player. It's a psychological trick. You are correct that it is quote unquote lazy design, but it's a psychological trick. I spend a talent point, I feel more powerful, therefore worth. It doesn't give me a new ability, but I feel more powerful, worth. And that's all you really want to make the player feel. I felt more powerful once I leveled up, right? That's what you're going for. And then when you do get a new ability, that's like an extra hype feeling. Like, oh my God, yes, this is cool. Or when a talent changes the way an ability works mechanically, that's a great feeling. Oh yeah, this is really cool. But you can't have that for every single one of the talents, because then you go back to almost the Legion, BFA, and Shadowlands design philosophy, where you can't give players new talents every single level. And then you start asking the question, well, what's the point of leveling in the first place? If I'm just, I'm dinging one level higher, but I don't get anything from it, what's the point? So I don't quite, I don't think it I get what you're saying, but at the end of the day, you sort of have to employ tricks to make people feel like they're getting more powerful, even though, technically speaking, you don't need those things. You can just do it internally. But, it is what it is. And another thing is, it's actually a balancing trick. By putting some of the quote-unquote haste gains or mastery gains or DPS gains onto the talent tree and making sure that people can't pick all of those gains, it makes it manageable. Because if you gave all of those gains passively to the class, and then, they could pick whatever abilities they wanted, you'd very soon end up with very overpowered classes that you would have to balance just on the back end. So it's sort of like a way of saying, you could go for more abilities, but then you're going to have fewer damage increases, or you're going to have less haste. Or you could go for more haste and damage increase, but fewer abilities. It's kind of up to you, right?
Going over art assets, other types of informational reviews, just having something up on your screen right in front of you in Zoom, having someone be able to mark up or paint over something there, far beats packing people into a conference room and having someone uncomfortably in the back squinting at something that's being projected on the other end of the room. There's no reason to ever go back to that. I think it is, it's the social connections, it's the casual interactions that are the hardest to reproduce, but we continue to work at it. And then obviously the other, major event last year, I think really it triggered a period of ongoing self-reflection for the team as a whole, for the company as a whole. Starting last summer, it was both, looking inward to our culture, to our history, to, frankly ask, are we who the internet says we are? Is this who we really are? And I think the answer we came to is no, but also certainly it's who we never want to be and want to have no chance of being. And so how do we change our processes? How do we develop a culture of feedback and listening and openness and trust that makes sure that even the slightest hint of impropriety will be raised and dealt with before we ever got any place close to the allegations from years and years ago? But at the same time, we were also listening to our player base and kind of re-examining, we were hearing lots of feedback, not just about anger at the revelations in the lawsuits, but about the state of the game.
Yep.
It was a double whammy. Your I'm quitting video very much included. Of we're missing something big here, right? Our goal at the end of the day is to make a world that players want to spend time in, that they're going to love spending time in, and that's the passion that drives all of us. And we're failing, and so I think where that led us as a team was also, it was a challenging time in general, a hard time to do kind of creative work going forward when everyone's distracted.
Fun, right? Amongst all this, let's make something really fun.
and so all that energy kind of was channeled initially into patch 9.15, which was what everyone wanted to feel like, as opposed to working on some far off idea, building some zone for an expansion that was a year and a half off. Let's solve problems today. Mm-hmm. Our players are hurting, our players aren't happy. How can we help today? Let's make a bunch of changes. Let's actually re-examine everything they've asked for that we've said no to, and double check, triple check that we believe we're doing the right thing here. And in some cases, that was turning over old stones of design philosophy that had been kind of taken for granted for 15 plus years. That the things we were always trained by our predecessors about, the rule, what should or shouldn't be account wide, and the importance of investment in your character, and the importance of this or that, and asking okay, maybe those things were right for the game 15 years ago. It's interesting to hear, but they're not making players happy today, and so do they still hold? Should we still apply them? And I think that began a process of letting players play the game the way they want. And I think what we were hearing loud and clear from folks was, look, there's this part of your game that I love. I would happily spend all the time in the world doing this thing, but if you make me do this other thing that I really don't like in order to do the thing I like, I'm going to do neither of them.
Yep.
And I'm just going to leave. And we as stubbornly as at times we were trying to stick to, we want all of this integration, and you shouldn't be able to just raid log, and you shouldn't be able to just, do one thing, or we're not really a massively multiplayer world anymore. We're just, a group of sandboxes. If we're not making our players happy, then what's the point of any of it?
Yeah, I would actually put that down to something I brought up a lot. Is it felt like you guys were prideful, very prideful, and to a stubbornness on certain things. And I think we can look at flying as the prime example of this, because at one point I did a video which was the things I think Blizzard really regrets doing that have led to consequences later on. And number one on that list was flying, because the Burning Crusade, flying came in to solve a problem that solved itself in the Burning Crusade, because vanilla is just a hodgepodge of stuff, people hiding in boxes and crayons around the world, and the zones are all over the place, and Azeroth is designed in a really horrible way geographically for traversing it. And then the Burning Crusade comes out, and it's basically a circle, and the flight points are fine, so flying not particularly necessary. But in Wrath of the Lich King, it was embraced again.
Yeah.
And then after that, it kind of became like the bastard child of the family. Like, did this take something away from the game? Which it did. And I think that's absolutely true. It kind of falls in that category for me as trans.
Truffle Shuffle, I don't agree at all with that, because I don't view it as the story being hidden behind rape grind. I view it from a normal perspective. Seconnect, by the way, 14 months, part of the DJ Nation. Appreciate your fam. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If I just meet you, right? If I literally just meet you today, and there is something going on in my life that I need help for, right? I'm not going to tell you about it. Because I don't know you. I have no idea who the fuck you are. Why would I tell you my most intimate secrets? Why would I share my most intimate problems with you? It doesn't make any sense, right? And most of these races in in Dragonflight have never seen you. They don't know who the hell you are, right? So at the end of the day, you have to gain favor with them. You have to get to know them. And there's no daily grind. I log in twice a week. And I do the weeklies twice a week because they reset twice a week. And that's it, right? That's it. That's all I do. It takes like 3-4 hours, then I'm done. And it doesn't matter because the story does unfold as, at a nice pace. I didn't feel like I was committing myself to it. It didn't feel like I was playing super many hours in order to get stuff unlocked. I literally just log in when I have some time. I haven't had time to log in the last 2 weeks, and I don't feel like I've missed anything. I'll go back and I'll go do a few more world quests, and I'll soon have everything unlocked. Although I do think I have all the story unlocked at this point. I think it's reasonably paced, which makes sense as far as, they need to trust you before they'll tell you about anything important going on. I found a lot of the side quests to be really enjoyable anyway, so it doesn't really bother me. But again, that is my opinion. And everyone has different things that they like and different ways that they want to play. So I fully see where you're going. But I, for example, don't have that problem, which is just another point on the side of why designing video games is so fucking hard, right? Because for one person, the design of Dragonflight is perfectly fine. Doesn't bother me at all. For another person, it's like, dude, I don't want to fucking do this every week. Just give me the story. And how do you make both players happy? Because, there's going to be that conflict. There's also the group of people that's complaining that there isn't enough daily grind in World of Warcraft to keep them busy. So that's a true conflicting problem, right? So it's sort of like, you're never going to be able to keep everyone happy, so find a middle ground, and I think that middle ground is pacing. Is it at least well enough paced to where players don't feel like they have to spend all of their time playing the game in order to see new things pop up? And I think in that regard, it is fine. I think so, at least.
Transmog does take something from the game in that you see those people in those bright armors and you finish that set, but it's so overwhelmingly. It makes so many people happy that it's not an issue. And it kind of, when I saw the title,
You
and
will,
it was
I haven't seen
getting
it yet,
leaked
no.
and things like that. But I was like,
How you
if
doing,
it
man?
really is that, this actually is a statement, and it felt like a statement. It's like one of the things we're gonna do again because we haven't done it since. What?
Mists, if you want to talk about being able to fly at launch in some
It would
form.
be Miss, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
In fact, Wrath was last thing embraced.
Yeah, WAD was the infamous no flying until
Which was such a
Pathfinder was
shame.
added
I was on
in
board with you.
622.
Yeah, if it wasn't for the way Garrisons went, like, if you could show people it was good to be on the ground, but it didn't work out, and then you had to relent. I actually felt really bad that day. It's like, almost. But now this is the feature of the game. It's like, it's here, it's big,
And it's cool as shit.
impressive, and it's easily the most fun thing I've done in Dragonflight so far. Is the
Cool.
races, and
Agreed.
especially the group races. There's a tension there. I haven't felt that for a long time with something that wasn't in 2% of the raid boss health left. Am I winning? Is he coming behind me? Has he got his boost left? And I'm just, I feel
shit,
more
that
like,
feels
is this
horrible.
like again that change?
Oh, watching him fly here when you fly into something and you just come to an immediate stop, and it's like, fuck! Now I have to finish the course and then go again, even though I've screwed myself. Dude, I have had so many frustrating Dragonflight races because I fly into a leaf that just won't let me pass. And it's like, oh, for the love of fuck. I'll go again, no problem. Let's do this again. And then, you do it again, and then you finally get it. No, I don't reset the race, because the more you do it, the more you learn where you need to go. So I don't reset the race. No. I keep going, because the more you do it, the better you get at it. And then when you finally do get it, it's that moment of, yes, fuck yes, I've done it, and now I can continue. Now I'm fine.
Your philosophy you're talking about last 15 years is like, why are we treating flying like this? It's really fun. And in fact, going to Ulduar for the first time is magical. Crossing the Ice Crown Gate is magical when you could finally do it.
And he missed
And
it.
it's like, now it's become this.
Dude, you're
ridiculous
missing the green
achievement
things.
which makes no sense. Still, I'm gonna hope it's that.
Well, wait, the Pathfinder were largely I mean, I think we've largely backed away from in past expansions.
God.
Yeah.
Oh, it's horrible. But yeah, is this part of the statement with Dragonflight? It's Dragonflight, because I imagine you already know the next expansion. And so it's like, no, we were going that way. But it feels like a statement.
I mean, well, our future expansions won't all have flight in the name, but like, but yeah, I mean, it was, I think in terms of coming up with a name, we obviously knew what the features were, knew what the setting was, and it felt like there's a couple different names, right? The dragon flights are a thing. There is flight.
Given the philosophical change, it felt very coincidental, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I mean, the vibe of the expansion as a whole is definitely meant to be a breath of fresh air. It's a return to Azeroth. Wide open exploration. It's, a fraction of the feeling you might get playing a game like Breath of the Wild and looking out over, rolling plains and feeling like that land is yours to explore.
It hits those two things, right? Flying and dragons, because dragons hadn't been around for a while, and then the Rathian fight, unfortunately, was boss 1, so not super impressive. Certainly better than Deathwing. Your fingers.
It was Vexiona later in the same instance.
Yeah, Onyxia too. But like dragons is a big thing. Obviously, like people remember the Onyxia and Nefarian fight so fondly, and it felt like this feels like it's perfectly in line with the actual gameplay core loop that you're changing. Are you worried? Because I feel like the game has been out so long now. Someone like me could look at Dragonflight and be like, heaven. I can come away for a week like I am now here with you guys. I'm not screwed.
Yeah.
I'm not screwed over. I'm not screwing my raid team or anything like that. And this is fine. But we've now got a huge amount of players who have never known World of Warcraft without logging in and having a list created for them of things that they should do.
And it is a problem.
That's going to be met with the player base once they get into an environment. It's like, choose where you want to go.
And I think the hope is, well, I mean, there's still you can look at your world map and there's plenty of activities. There's world quests, other events. There's things to do to raise your different renowns that you're chasing. And early on, again, for the people who don't have their sights set on doing high Mythic Plus or jumping in and getting into Mythic rating as soon as they can, a lot of the item level rewards from all of those systems will be very relevant. And, going and helping either, Rathian or Sibelian out the Obsidian Citadel or otherwise. Depends. It depends on how I feel on any given day.
Commit. Coward.
No.
Pick a side.
we'll see. We'll see what the canon choice ends up being. But in any case, like all of those things are offering powerful rewards. It's not like we've just said there's no more reward in the game. But for the people who, the people who are focused on the hardcore stuff, who are getting, 410 plus gear from other sources, they have plenty. They have plenty to do, and we don't need to try to, offer them more reasons to spend more time in World of Warcraft than they're otherwise spending. And I think, all this is just there with a sense of freedom to explore it as you see fit. For some people, maybe you're going to focus on getting raid ready during the first couple of weeks. And you'll come back and check out the renowned tracks later, because there are mounts or dragon riding skins or other things you want to unlock. Or again, if you're someone who's really focused on professions, there are specific recipes. If you're a leatherworker, you're going to want to, work on that centaur renown to get some of the leatherworking recipes from there. So it's all of the same philosophies are there. It just, we don't have that artifact power, that, soulbind renown, that thing that is just hitting everyone over the head with being completely mandatory regardless of your playstyle. And again, that gets back to, we don't want to force players into content that they don't inherently enjoy. We want to let you play the game the way you want to play the game.
Are you far more relaxed now with it's okay if people aren't logging in week on week? If they log in just for... Because you mentioned earlier, raid logging would be the prime example, but obviously in terms of logging in to do the specific thing it wants to do, it's felt like for a good long time now, we want people online, we want WoW to be a part of their daily habits almost. By intention, your mission, even your mission board and BFA, collecting your Azerite power, whatever it might be. As a lot of these systems seem designed to engage somebody at least on a daily basis as the norm. So are you more relaxed now with that? Probably isn't going to be. It won't be for me. Is what I would say. It's not going to be. There's other options out there that are equally as fun, and maybe less fun, but also I can jump into that experience very quickly. You've got games like Path of Exile out there that are just free.
Sure.
Not going through a great time right now, but generally speaking, the market is so flooded with this. Is this something you're adapting to, accepting, or?
I mean, all the above to an extent. I mean, I think we never want, our goal is never habit in the sense of like you have to log in when you don't want to. Our goal is for you to want to log in. Our goal is for you to want to play World of Warcraft and to look forward to getting back into the game, to have something you want to complete, something you want to chase.
That's been the case for me. So I would say for me as a player, they've nailed this. When I log into WoW, it's not because I feel this sense of dread of, oh my god, I have to do this now. When I log into WoW, it's because I genuinely want to. There's something I want to achieve. There's something I want to do. There's something I literally just thought about and I thought, let me go check it out. So I really think that in that regard, they've nailed it for me. But I also think that it is going to take some time. For those players that have gotten used to this, the game tells you what to do, right? And the game tells you what your chores are for the day. And tomorrow it's going to tell you what your chores are for tomorrow. I think it's going to take time for those players to realize that all of those chores are still there. They're just no longer chores. They're now up to you. You decide if you want to go do that. And if you don't want to do it, then you don't have to. It's fine. You don't need to do it. But if you do, it's still there. It still hangs out. There's more than enough things for you to do in the game to keep yourself busy. And there's going to be even more. Because we know that the next patch is just around the corner. None of the old things are going away. They're still going to be there. The next patch is just going to add even more things for you to do. Another one of the zones that's been closed until now for us will now open, which means you can go there and you can actually now, increase your daily activity if that is something you care to do. Only has to keep us logging in at least once a month. That gets in their subs. If they let me choose what gets me to log in and how often, they get paid either way. Exactly. My point exactly. As long as you keep me wanting to play the game at least once a month, I will keep paying because it's not too much money in order to get some enjoyment out of the game. I log in more than twice a month, but, I firmly agree with your assertion.
And if you're not wanting it, then getting you to do it despite that isn't a victory for us. It's just burning people out. And so I think giving people the freedom to feel like they can take a step away, do something in real life, play another game for a while without falling behind
So
is valuable.
good to hear Ian
I
say
think
that.
the one thing that we do worry about when it comes to, you know, sort of the raid logging phenomenon or people taking breaks is the social nature of the game. Is, you know, sort of the critical mass of keeping a group together. If the person who is really excited to log in to do things with their guildmates logs in and no one from their guild is online because of whatever reason, and then they just log back off kind of disappointed because they were hoping to play with friends but their friends weren't around, that can be an issue. And I think that's something, you know, going back to WoD, to Warlords of Draenor, that was probably the peak of the raid logging.
You, Lemon, Blizzard will never in their lives remove the monthly sub. The reason is the WoW token. As long as the WoW token exists, and as long as the WoW token is their biggest money driver, the monthly sub will never be removed. That thing generates so much money for Blizzard Entertainment. There's no way, because they will never make the same amount of money off of cosmetics than what they make off of that monthly sub. Because I know so many players that pay for their monthly WoW off of WoW tokens. And WoW tokens isn't just $15 a month. WoW tokens is $20 a month. Not for you that's buying the WoW token or using the WoW token to pay your WoW, but for the person that bought the WoW token, yeah, it's $20 that they spent for you to play the game. So obviously, they're making a shit ton of money off of the sub.
Era where really there was like, I've been checking your garrison. If it wasn't raid night, there was nothing to do. It wasn't because
That wasn't
Plus didn't
outside
even
your
exist
garrison
back then
as well, you know? Like,
Yeah.
Go in, look at all 10 of your characters, or I think it
Yeah,
was 10
and
at the time.
And so that felt like a step too,
Well,
like,
that
like
I
too
can
far.
see. So what I can see is if once the deal goes through, the merger between Microsoft and Blizzard, I can absolutely see Blizzard going, okay, if you have Xbox Game Pass, WoW is free. So that I could see, because ultimately the $15 a month, they're still getting their money. You just now get WoW as well. Or maybe, you know, you do something where if you pay the $15 a month for the Xbox Game Pass, you only pay $5 a month for WoW or something. That I can absolutely see. But then again, it is Bobby Kotick at the helm. Bobby Kotick would probably say you pay $15 a month for the Xbox Game Pass, and then you pay $15 a month for WoW. And what we give you for free is a pet, the first one that you get. So I wouldn't hold my breath. As long as Kotick is there, things will not change. The game will still try to milk things as much as they can. Yeah, I mean, if Spencer could get rid of Kotick, that would be a nice thing, I guess.
Toward that end of the spectrum. But ultimately, you know, as long as we're keeping social groups somewhat healthy, we want people to be able to play the game in the way that makes them happiest.
Excellent. Like, this is all very positive.
Right?
Yeah,
it's
like...
It seems like it should. It's kind of a no-brainer, but...
Well, no, I mean,
yeah.
that's the experience I've had, and I've been on some mystical quest now, like Kung Fu, is like trying all these different experiences. Like, the main thing I'm seeing is they just create experiences that you want to log in for, you don't have to log in for, which is what I remember from World of Warcraft. And how has Classic influenced this decision? Because it's the irony of you think you want it, but you don't. And now it's from what we can tell, it's overwhelmingly more popular than retail. It feels that way statistically, but I mean, you would know better than I.
I don't know if that's accurate. I mean, certainly right at launch, maybe, but I think long term, there are healthy populations in both spheres. And I think we've seen people largely express a preference for one game or the other. It hasn't kind of cannibalized the player base of Shadowlands, of future Dragonflight. There are people who've just made it clear that, like, this is the version of WoW they prefer, and that's awesome. But at the same time, you know, I think we have learned a lot from watching the way people play those versions of the game, and what things still hold up, and what things have changed. I mean, I think we were talking about this earlier. You know, talent respecking is one of those examples of something that, you know, modified players' behavior and deterred them from respecking 15 years ago. Today, it's actually it's a major nuisance of, like, it's just this annoying cost that you have to incur as perceived. And so, like, that's something that, you know, we're still in a relatively no changes mindset. We're not looking to, you know, completely overhaul and redesign the game, But those are designs that aren't really, I think, successful designs today. Whereas a lot of the core of, accessible content, social collaboration, realm communities, all the rest, still holds up, and there's a lot for us to aspire to return to there.
Yeah, it seems like it's you can actually. I don't know where you're going with Classic, but you're getting to watch. Oh, but do these old school players still exist? Seemingly so. And they're playing in a different way, and there's things they like. And now you can almost have a test bed of like, this is what they actually really like, and this is what they don't, to drag things back into that. And it's got to be a useful metric to be able to plan for the future of retail, right?
I mean, again, it's less about planning for the future of Shadowlands, Dragonflight, than it is just about making sure that we're listening to that community and giving them what they want. And that's a lot of, I think Classic when it first launched was firmly in the no changes camp of like, look, we're not even gonna ask you a lot of these questions. The point is we're going to authentically recreate the 2005 experience as best we possibly can, except where, there's a couple of technical considerations that prevent us from doing so. Since then, well, now, there's a player base of millions of folks who've said, we like this game, we've chosen to make this our home. We ignore them at our folly. Like, what do they want? What do they not want when it comes to how dungeons should work or what quality of life?
I see a conversation in chat happening that I do want to just quickly add my 2 cents to. I do think $15 a month is way too high for a sub for a game, especially when you start to mirror that or you start to compare it to things like $15 a month for Xbox Game Pass, which is over 200 games, versus $15 a month for WoW, which is 1 game, right? Then you start to go, wait a second, this is quite a lot of money for a single game. Doesn't mean I mind the sub. I understand why the sub exists. I understand that we get, some decent customer service, and there's a lot of, at least, there is a lot of continuous development and stuff that happens on the game, which obviously a lot of the 200 games on Xbox Game Pass doesn't have because they're single-player games. But at the end of the day, I do think $15 is too much, but that appears to be the number that most people in the gaming audience, at least, are fine with paying. That seems to be the number that a lot of MMOs land on as well. And for now, it's not a number that I've looked at where it's been so much that I've refused to pay it. I'm happily subbed for 6 months. I'm going to resub for 6 months as soon as this 6 months is up, and I have no problems with it. I'm subbed to Final Fantasy as well, and that's also $15 a month. So at the end of the day, it's not a number that I think is breaking the bank, but I do understand that it is a lot. But I think that's where the WoW token comes in. For players that can't afford it, they can at least still play the game through the WoW token.
Improvements would be welcome, even though they're not authentic to the original game, versus what things they absolutely don't want to see. And that guides the evolution. We want to make sure that at its core, it's still the content, the spirits, the mechanics of the original game, but we also don't want to, close any doors to things that are going to make the majority of the people playing that game happier just because it's inauthentic.
Oh, good. I wanted to talk about evergreen content because Season 4 is another big change I've noticed, because over the years, you guys have fell into a habit of almost cannibalizing your own game with every patch.
Yeah.
Which felt very wasteful. Like, I can't imagine the R&D that went into some of these systems. Dungeons, I mean, if you go back to Kata, it was like, in Wrath, every time the TOC came out, right, every other dungeon's irrelevant now. Yeah. No point in doing it. And the same with raids, and obviously there's arguments to and for linear raids. But Season 4, you've started to maybe consider, and we've actually seen this happen in a number of other MMOs recently, certainly the ones that are a decade plus, where they're like, we have a wealth of content that we've created over these years.
Okay, this is going to be interesting.
Left it. And there definitely seems to have been a lack of iteration in Blizzard. Like Garrisons. Garrisons are remembered not fondly, unfortunately. But the premise is really good. It's just people want maybe a more cosmetic style than a practical solution. Warfronts. Yeah. How excited was the player base when Warfronts were announced? And unfortunately, it didn't go that way. The same with Island Expeditions. We all watched the Sneaky Pete promise, and you're going to hate these guys, and they're going to interfere with you and stuff, and then part of the mandatory element was there. Yeah. But we can reel a list off here of huge systems, huge resources that are brought into the game, which have been left to like, okay, and class halls I would definitely put in here, which feel like such a waste. And what is the thoughts there now for like over the next few years is to change that instead of reinventing the wheel every expansion.
Yeah, I think, I mean, so there's a couple of pieces to that. Some of that is definitely the move away from, expansion specific systems that also would turn into borrowed whatever because they were going to go away, back to evergreen improvements. I think, broadly speaking, I think you could almost carve out 3 eras of World of Warcraft philosophy and development. And I would say that the first era was from Classic all the way through Mists of Pandaria, where every expansion was adding extra layers, extra systems, new professions, new races, new classes, new things.
Still
and then
removed a lot of things.
We kind of reached, as we were coming up on almost 10 years at that point, a turning point, arguably a little bit of a crisis, as we were coming off like 2 expansions in a row. We'd had like 12 to 13 month final tiers, and just looking at like this infinite scalability, like this infinite exponential growth of like what it takes to make an expansion, both in terms of development, but also player-facing complexity of like, how many systems do we have now? How just complicated is the game becoming? We're going to keep running this game for years and years and decades to come. Can we really just keep adding new permanent systems every couple of years forever? No. And so I think, that's what led to some of the class pruning philosophy that went into Warlords. It's what led it to kind of pulling back in some areas, but also the idea that we needed to be able to make things that were not permanent, that we could go deeper, focus them on a single expansion, have them be the hallmark of that expansion, but they weren't going to add to the ongoing complexity. That was, and so I think that was going into Warlords. And I think, as you mentioned, there were definitely some missteps with the garrisons. But I think, moving ahead into Legion, it was like, well, okay, obviously we don't want something that pulls you out of the world. The class hall in some loose ways with the mission table, with some of its trappings and customization, was a little bit of a successor to the garrison system. We wanted it to be a social space where you'd see all the other people of your class. And of course, that's where we also brought in, a power component to it, artifact power, and all those systems. And
Ian, if you ever watch this, I have the easiest win in the world for you. And I absolutely mean this. If Ian wants to win instantly, right now in World of Warcraft, they announce in... let's think. How much time would they need for this? I'm trying to think now. How much time would they need for this? Okay, so let's say this. If Ian and the team wanted an instant win for World of Warcraft right now, then in patch 10.1.5, they announced the return of garrisons. Purely cosmetic. And with all of the hallmark doodads that you would find throughout the world. So, for example, you find buildings that are sort of undead, buildings that are troll, buildings that are Tauren, or buildings that are Night Elf, or buildings that are Draenei, whatever the case might be, right? And you can change your garrison in whichever way you want, right? So you can literally make your garrison the place that you envisioned it to be. It's not housing, but it's close to housing. And that, I think, is the only thing that matters right now. It's a first step into what housing would be. That would be a massive win in World of Warcraft right now. I think that might take more than 4 to 6 months, as that's time frame for 10.1.5. I don't think it would. The garrisons are already there. Most of those cosmetic doodads already exist. So you're basically just talking about a pane of coat, right? On top of the garrison. You don't, right now, that's just the starting point. From there, you can start adding new and better ways of customizing it, like being able to put trophies and paintings, and maybe eventually move some of the buildings around. But as a starting point, just allow players to change the cosmetic look of their garrison, and then make those things drop in Dragonflight. So you might be doing a world quest in Dragonflight, and suddenly here drops the undead skinning building. You're like, oh shit, I'm building my undead garrison right now. Let me just, go and add that now. Now I have my undead skinning building, or whatever the case might be, right? And then maybe you're doing a raid boss, and this raid boss has a chance to drop the undead auction house. And that's the one that I wanted, so that's what I'm going to be doing, right? Unlocking all of these things, it gives players a reason to play Dragonflight, but then also at the same time, it scratches the initial itch for housing. It's not yet a full solution to housing, and I get that, but it's a start, I think. And I think that would be, in my opinion at least, that's probably the best place to start with it. You have private servers that can do this sort of stuff. Should be easy for Blizzard. Well, yeah, you do have private servers that can do it, but, you never know what the coding looks like on those private servers versus the official code. But the fact that private servers can do it means that everyone should technically be able to do it, right?
And it's important to bear in mind that, we are always we're planning a couple of expansions in advance. Mm-hmm. The development cycle of an expansion is quite lengthy, from initial conception
and Save and I agree with that as well.
Concepting, beginning to flesh things out. So we had, we knew what the feature set for Shadowlands was going to be well before Battle for Azeroth came out.
Yeah.
And so a lot of that was the ongoing outgrowth of what seemed like a very successful experiment at Legion. Legion was very well received overall, very popular overall. People had nothing but praise for its systems, and so part of what the team as a whole was thinking was okay, this is a great formula for a modern expansion. That
I see the thought process now.
What is our artifacts of the next expansion? What are the things that are going to fill these holes that we're going to leave? Now, there were a few things that we were still blind to. I think first off was the initial excitement of oh my god, I no matter how much WoW I want to play, I can always keep progressing my character. This is awesome. I can log in on Saturdays and feel like I accomplished something, as opposed to the raid logging people were accustomed to in Warlords. That was energizing initially, but gave way to fatigue by the end of Legion, as we started to hear, complaints about AP grinding and the sense of okay, I can always be progressing my character. That means I always should be progressing my character. I don't have
so you're
time
talking
for
about
alts
the
and
never-ending amount you can acquire.
Yes.
Versus one thing that took away in BFA was that anything you did gave you AP.
Yes, that continued. So I think, but I think again, a lot of the decisions about what BFA was going to look like were already almost completely locked in for all intents and purposes before we started to learn the lessons from Legion. And even Shadowlands was beginning to respond to what didn't work in BFA, what was missing from BFA, things like what could the successor to the class halls be? What if there are Covenant halls? What if these are places that have more depth and interest to them than anything we offered in BFA? But it wasn't really until we were halfway through that cycle that we started to really have concerns about, the shift that had begun all the way back in Warlords, about the modular approach that would take things away. Because people were not sad to say goodbye to their garrisons at the end of Warlords.
Shame, because if they'd been iterated on, they were potentially something amazing.
Perhaps, but the feedback, so people didn't really appreciate the extent of that pain. When BFA came out, we certainly did.
Yep.
Losing your artifacts sucked. Leaving, having all your legendaries disabled the second you hit level 115 sucked.
Not a good day getting into that alpha.
And I think, but again, at that point, we were already heavily committed on the course we were on, because we just, at some point, we have to keep marching forward. We have to keep making stuff. We can't throw out a year of work. But we started to have misgivings about that general direction. And I think realizing that the cycle we're falling into is one where every expansion begins by losing something that was awesome, leaving a hole that we then, at best, are scrambling to fill, and leave you maybe equal to where you were before, but if we screw up at all, lesser. That is not a path to success. And so that was the genesis for what I would like to think of as sort of the beginning of a third era of WoW philosophy, which begins with Dragonflight, which is trying to return to the idea of focused, evergreen things, improving baseline systems, introducing new systems.
You listen to this and you, like, I said this during the initial Preach video. You can listen to Ian's words here and realize that it's a deer stuck in headlights. You know it's coming. You almost know that players will hate Shadowlands before it launches, because you can hear the responses from BFA. Right? You know that players are not going to be happy with Shadowlands. But what do you do now? You've started to make Shadowlands before you even knew that players hated BFA. Now players hate BFA. You know that Shadowlands isn't that much different to BFA, but you're so far into the development of BFA or of Shadowlands that you can only keep going. Dude, that must be a miserable place for a developer to be, right? You have a year's worth of work. If you reset now, it kills the game because it means players are going to have nothing to do for over a year, right? For over a year, there will be nothing in WoW to do because you're basically restarting full development. You can't do that. So you just have to keep going and be like, well, we know the next expansion is going to be a fucking miserable experience, but here we go. We'll make sure that the one after that is good.
Into the game that we plan to carry forward, not introducing systems that we plan to, throw away at the end of a year and a half or whatever. But doing so, I think, in a more...
Same asked. Thank you so much for the Prime sub. Really appreciate that. Welcome to the most degenerate chat on Twitch. Thank you. Far too kind, sir.
Some sort of thoughtful way that, as you were saying much earlier, gives us some opportunities to make use of prior content and, feels like it's going to be sustainable in the years to come.
Yeah, it feels like such a shame when you look at... I look at class halls and things. It's like, you had all the character NPCs in there. And again, we come back to the RPG elements, which you guys are very, very acutely aware of. It's like, you would think after Darnus is burned, there should be something in those class halls where, because the factions are both in there, which would reflect that. And this kind of moves us to another... We're covering two topics blurringly, but they're both important, and I do want to not skip them. Is the living, breathing world part. There's so much potential there to really immerse you a bit more into the game, because I haven't felt that for WoW for a very long time where I'm in. Like, Runus was kind of the last time. Like, I actually felt for that character so badly. Now, I will say on the back of this, Dragonflight story is looking really good. Some fresh bloods in there, finally, and they're doing interesting things. And there's certain characters that are definitely going to come back without spoiling things. But WoW has seemingly, and this kind of explains the same thing with this modular approach of, like, this is going to be here, but we're not carrying it forward. So there's no development time, like you're saying, going into that for the next 12 months, which takes away from the actual... Ashara sinks all the ships. I can go on my island expeditions quite happily in the go between the islands. Sargeras...
Ladies and gentlemen, take a look. We were just talking about the different kinds of players in chat. Cassial is one of those filthy Mythic Plus players. Those people that don't care about the rest of the game. It's all about the Mythic Plus. And that's it. That's all that matters. But congratulations. Can we get some arts in chat? I think the highest I've done a Mythic Plus is 5, I think. I don't care for Mythic Plus at all, Saber Raven. I'll do it once in a while, but I don't care much for it.
Drops his knife, and there's no city being built there, which is what would happen in the living, breathing world. Is the goblins would be there trying to chip it off and get some armor, and it'd be a curiosity that would occur and stuff like that. Now, is that a resource issue, or is it a disruptive to player issue?
I mean, it's frankly, it's a little bit of both. So I think World of Warcraft has always existed in like these like geological strata almost when it comes to the timeline of expansions are frozen in their moment in time. When you go to Northrend today on live in Shadowlands, everyone's talking about the Lich King and the threats that are being posed there, And at the end, and like I think Chromie Time that we had as level up construct kind of tried to reconcile all of that and say like, yes, you are playing through this arc, this moment in time, and it's always been, you know, it's fourth wall breaking to an extent, but I think the challenge there is both updating spaces, as we've seen, can be destructive, it can remove content, it can change content that people wanted to do, and of course we can keep adding more phases. At some point, that whole thing becomes a maintenance nightmare that's going to be
Clean. 14 months, part of the DJ Nation. Appreciate ya. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You're far too kind. Most girls don't announce themselves. That's why you ask, bro. Like, first thing you do when you get into a Mythic Plus, you type, does anyone here have tits? And then you start playing. That's what a gentleman does. Always. You always have to ask first.
be both potentially bug prone and also confusing to players if there's 4 different versions of this zone that you could visit depending which timeline
you
you want
nice
to be
in Wrath, and it got very iffy sometimes.
Things could get messy. And the other piece is it's development resources. Everything is development resources, and that's not the. I know everyone immediately says like multi-billion-dollar company or multi-dollar company, depending on how
it's sorted, right?
Exactly. Okay, cool. So let's get 100 more people. Okay, what do we have them work on? It's still a finite number. It's a finite number of hours, and we want to spend those resources. We want to focus those resources in the ways that are going to add the most value for the most players. And that's the decision we're always making when it comes to everything. And so, how much player time is going to be spent here? How does this fit into our other plans? You know, when the Stormwind City languished in the aftermath of Deathwing's attack, and it became a meme among players of like, are they ever going to fix this?
Look at Van Cleef on it.
Of course it came up, but I think, again, the challenge is like, okay, is it worth asking our dungeon artists or 3D artists to spend a few hundred hours rebuilding Stormwind when they could, and this is where all the memes come from of like costing you a raid tier, like they could genuinely add an extra wing to the raid that's going to have 2 more bosses in it. Okay, yes, of course it would be a nice thing for the world to feel living and evolving and responding to things, and for repairs to happen and for new settlements to be built up. But if the story we're telling is over on this other continent, is anyone really going to get much value out of us updating this thing back in this different place when we could have instead put that exact time into something that we know for sure a million players are going to enjoy?
Well, let's give some context to those people, because I don't know the answer to this. Obviously you have I believe it falls with you, the ultimate decision. It's like, where are my developer teams spending their time? Because what we see with certain expansions is some features get a coat of paint or something, a slight iteration here and there, and then there's a whole new feature that comes in. So, like a mission board versus dragon flying. What is the time scale we are giving people there? Because we've got a couple of hours of advancement or a couple of years work on this, but realistically, it's like, why are you not updating this? Why if the Shadow Priests are all unhappy? It goes into every element of this game. Yeah. It's like, why aren't Pet Battles getting a lot of unique stuff? Why is Professions taking on this? Like, break it down for us, like, so we understand what it's like.
Yeah. So first of all, it's certainly not me as the sole, traffic conductor deciding.
I can't really add anything to that, Cassiel, because I don't think the only time I've ever played with girls in WoW that I've known is a girl is if it's in Discord, right? And they've joined the guild, and then suddenly I go, all right, this is a girl's voice. That's the only time I don't think I've ever played with a girl that's like announced, oh, I'm a girl. And in WoW, if anyone ever came into into a group and started with, oh, I'm a girl, I'd be like, that's a guy lying. This guy just wants us to give him fucking gold. Right? Like, that's the equivalent of the night elf dancing on a fucking mailbox. Like, don't believe that. That's a trap. Right? That's sort of, that would be my immediate response to that, would be, yeah, that's a trap right there. So yeah, I've never had that happen. Whenever I have played with girls is because, like, when we did Mythic Plus, I obviously played with you, which means I know that you're a girl, and therefore I know that I'm playing with a girl, or the girl came into Discord and I had, oh, this is a girl's voice. Right? Otherwise, I have no fucking idea. Whatever your gender is when we're playing WoW, I don't give a shit. The only question I have is, can you play the game? And if you can't play the game, can you suck my dick? Because you have to do one of the two, right? and that's really the only thing that's important there. We have like 10 girls in our guild. They're just guild moms, giving everyone else a hand at the bags and stocking bank with free food. Oh shit. Okay. That's why you say you're a girl, duh. All right. Akka's dick is claimed by the street corner hobo. No, I suck the hobo stick. My dick is free, bro. What are you talking about?
Just think everything. It's a huge team with a range of
Everyone's
leadership
pretty
and
much, yeah.
experts, and our production director is helping figure out the schedules and what can fit where. At the end of the day, I'm helping advise. I'm helping break deadlocks or guide decisions. But yeah, it's so we have a large team that's composed of, I think, 4 major disciplines. We have artists who are artists, engineers who write the code that runs on the client, runs on the servers, engine, everything in between. The designers who are assembling all of those assets to make the game itself. Producers who are overseeing our schedule to make sure that everything, the trains run on time, so to speak, that needs are met, and everything is communicating between those groups. Additionally, we also have an audio team, other support groups, everything from cinematics, QA, customer support, etc.
It's a maze, this place.
It's
I know it's nobody here right now, but I can imagine
there's a
it
reason.
bustling.
There's a reason why our cinematics, our games, all begin with Blizzard Entertainment Presents, because it truly is. There's nothing that I can say. Oh yeah,
Marketing wouldn't form part of his team, Golgoth. So that's probably why he's not speaking on that, because marketing would be part of Suits. So if he was sitting down with Mike Ybarra, Mike would speak about, we have the development teams, right? And that incorporates all 4 of these teams. But then we have the marketing team, and we have the press team, and we have that and that, right? Because that's Mike Ybarra's bullshit. That's business crap. Those are the guys that fuck us, effectively. You want to talk about the guys that's anti-player? It's everyone that works under Mike Ybarra. These are the guys that couldn't give 2 fucks about us as players, effectively. Olbamoto will send a pic of the design of the model. Oh shit, I can't wait, bro. That's gonna be fucking amazing.
I take credit for this. I made this. It's the effort of hundreds of thousands that go into every aspect.
Yeah, didn't Mike Ybarra say something really stupid just the other day? Like, now suddenly everyone hates him? I remember, apparently everyone hates Mike Ybarra now.
Of the game. But then at the end of the day, the folks in the development team are further subdivided by specialty. We have rewards designers and combat designers and encounter designers who are making both their raid and dungeon bosses, but also handling the combat abilities on outdoor rares and stuff that spawn. We have our world building team that's
I've always wanted a Big
3D
Johnson
environments and building the hills and placing the villages. Our quest team, our narrative team, etc. And so each one of these is, finite, though we are continuing to grow and often have open positions. If you check out our careers page, I'm also hiring in Boston now.
Massachusetts.
Indeed.
Represent.
Yeah. But ultimately, again, there's a finite number of hours to spend. So the question is, where do we put them? And so...
so a feature like Dragonflying, then, is representative of what?
So in that case, to use an example there, so the other key...
This is your big feature of the expansion.
Right, and it's not all of those resources are fungible, because there's different areas of expertise. And that's why, again, to play into a bunch of memes, it's like, yes, we know that this class is broken. The person who released the marketing video isn't the one who would have been fixing the bug with the class. But a lot of this boils down to that sort of thing as well. And so when you're asking for a comparison between, let's say, a mission board and dragon riding, in many cases, dragon riding is much larger, but it's different groups of people working on them. A huge piece of making dragon riding.
Okay, fine, chat. We'll watch Preach's video next, right? His next video about Mike Ybarra's bullshit. I don't know when the fuck we're gonna finish this stream then, because we still have an entire Diablo video to watch as well. But we'll watch Preach's video that speaks about Mike Ybarra's fucking bullshit, and then we'll get into the Diablo video.
Happen was actually very animation dependent. It was both animation and a lot of our engine and gameplay programmers.
Nailed it, by the way. The sense of speed is fantastic.
Which is that's fantastic to hear. I think that's one of those things that we knew from just the feel was going to be essential to that feature. All the other systems, the progression, everything else we could build into it. None of that would matter if your first 5 seconds didn't make you say, "This is awesome."
Yep.
If it felt clunky, if it felt just off in some way, we were going to lose people right there. But in any case, so that was a feature that
I'm watching Amaranth off there. I'm not allowed to watch Amaranth on stream. The things I do is not Twitch friendly. I'm gifting so much. I'm gonna be a boyfriend soon. I know it.
Required all new, just actual animations, but also code to hook in the animations to the different aspects of our physics engine to make all that happen, as well as, of course, the character artists who made the models themselves, our systems designers who handled and tuned all the parameters and integrated unlocking it, and all of that. Whereas something like a mission board may be more heavily on our user interface team.
Yeah.
Our UX designers who are kind of doing the wireframes and adding the 2D art, and the gameplay engineers and the systems designers who are filling that system out.
A better question might be then, because we haven't got like it wouldn't look nice to give a number to it, is you have so many talented, top-tier, creative people here. How many ideas are you turning down?
Countless.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, and that's there is every area has a backlog of things that we want to do, of cool ideas, cool improvements that are simply, we want it. So some will get to someday, others will likely never get to, but maybe they turn into something else, maybe they get transformed. But we try to encourage an environment. We have the words "every voice matters" are carved around the orc outside.
Yep.
One of those things one of the things that reflects is that great ideas come from everywhere, and we have open email channels, Slack channels. Everyone is free to throw out ideas inspired by other games they've played, by things that annoyed them when they were playing WoW last night. They wish we could improve.
There's the Echo Sump emote. Since you were asking, Max, that's the one. The Goss at the end there, it stands for God of Simps.
And those get either entered as tasks or filed away in a backlog
So it's
for us
true
to return to.
when raid boss nerfs happen, it's when you've started playing them, right?
Rarely, actually.
You've got there. Well, we're being told to stop, so I think that's us.
All right, this was really cool. I really enjoyed this one. It's gonna be a bitch to edit because this is 2.5 hours. But it is what it is. I need to go pee, and then we'll get into the next video. But I first need to pee. I absolutely have to fucking pee. So the rest of you can go and pee as well. Grab a drink or something. I'm going to play an ad. And then when we get back, we're going to watch Preach's next video, which is about, or Baul. People asked about Baul in this video. Fuck it. We'll do this. We'll do another poll, right? We'll do a new poll. Whose video do we watch? Balila? Preach. You guys can decide whose video we watch on the nonsense that's going on. There you go. Poll is live. You should be able to vote in it now. And I'm going to run an ad, and then I'll be right back. God. I'm back. That's a reputation so far. Really? I mean, to be fair, what was it? What was his distributor thinking was going to happen? I mean, it's not the kind of game that's going to sell through the roof. As much as he might think that it will, or as much as the distributors might think that it will, it isn't the kind of game that's going to sell through the roof. It's a game that's going to do well for people like myself, right? That really love stories, but for a lot of people, I don't think it's going to do that much. So which one of the videos we're watching Bally's video, right? I think that's what you guys voted for. So we're heading over to Bally's video now. Warcraft. I don't want to do this one now. Videos. This one. I'm assuming. World of Warcraft stability is under serious threat. About to watch Amaranth stream. Maybe later. You know? But you have to watch Amaranth stream with the lights down. So if I'm going to watch an Amaranth stream, it has to be like this, right? This is how I'll watch Amaranth stream. If I'm going to do it like live, right? This is how we'll watch it. If you guys don't mind. Yeah, just setting the mood. It's auntie, because we don't want to hear. Yeah, of course. Everything will be muted, lights will be down. And we can... Yeah, that should work, right? With the meat getting seasoned. Oh yeah, absolutely. All right, never mind. Let's watch the video here. Now, from what I've heard about this issue, and it isn't much, like, not gonna lie, it really isn't much. I know that people are angry at Mike Ybarra for saying a bunch of things. I've seen Twitter blow up about it. Like, apparently there's been some nonsense, and it specifically goes to, or it started with people having to return back to work, and now it's sort of gone above that, if that makes sense. Like, apparently he said things during that whole people have to return to work thing that's now even blown up even more. So let's hear. Apparently this is like huge drama, and as you guys know, I live for drama. I'm a huge slut when it comes to drama.
Welcome back to another video, everyone. Right, this one is pretty damn serious. I think it's something that is rather existential to the long-term health of World of Warcraft, because Blizzard's management is currently sabotaging the World of Warcraft team and Blizzard at large, right? I therefore think it's important that the players know what's going on, while we've been having the devs doing a far better job with way more content. And of course, there's patch 10.1 on the way. 10.07 is probably not that far away as well, right? We're actually getting a higher patch cadence. The team's getting bigger. But Blizzard are going to lose out to the other companies in terms of getting staff in. And we all know that a game is only as good as the team who makes it. So if you gouge your team for short-term profit, you're going to damage your long-term. And for us players, it's the long-term health that matters. Because we need to feel like we can safely invest time in an MMO. Because why would you spend a long time in an MMO that ultimately is being made by a team that feels a bit doomed? So with that said, I definitely am going to get a bit animated in this.
Okay.
But let's go. So the ultimate TLDR here is that Blizzard hosted an internal pre-screened Q&A to address employee concerns over being basically a change in the work from home policy that was on decently short notice, right? And it was pre-screened so the management could basically
it's
have
the
an
bonus
easy time
cuts.
and avoid
That's the thing that
curveballs.
blew people
But the
up.
problem is that Mike Ibarra managed to throw a bunch of curveballs so curved that they actually came back and hit him in the face. He made some moves that, from a basic leadership perspective, and it's kind of funny, you know, with the Pale Beyond, our game is basically about leadership. You know, the audiobook about the Shackleton expedition that I listened to as a kid came bundled with a book about the leadership lessons from Shackleton. And it's just like, holy shit, Mike, how are you so incompetent at your job? Because the thing is, Mike could have actually accomplished all of the points that he wanted to, even though they're unpopular, in so much better of a way by employing like the basics of communicating. I do not understand how somebody gets to ascend to the point of being leader of Blizzard Entertainment when they're not even able to give a decent performance in a situation like this.
I mean, it's not hard to know how someone like Mike Ibarra reached the leadership of Blizzard. It's not hard to know why someone like Bobby Kotick reaches the leader or the leadership of Activision Blizzard. In a system that is so rotted to its core, what goes to the top? It's the corrupt. It's those that have zero principles, zero moral fortitude. They are the ones that go to the top because the system has been built like that. The system is built to favor those that don't really have a moral compass, don't really look at things and go, this might be a little evil, at least, right? This might be a tiny smidge evil. Let's not do it. Other corrupt people do not want good people in their midst because the good people in their midst aren't controllable. It's not easy to go to a good person and get that good person to do bad things. It's far easier or far more likely that the good